Your pick. No pressure.
What
Sure.
But it's very similar in the sense of like what we do with the Native Americans, which whether it's good or bad, kind of at least putting these programs in place to support, again, whether they're good or bad, or whether they're like good, like enough or not enough, but putting in these systems to be like, okay, these are people that were displaced. My family was displaced. We did have a home. We did have a business. My entire family had businesses. How do we fix that? If we went in there and we took it and they kicked us off of it, how do we fix that? How do we make sure that that's supplemented to be like, okay, at the very least, here's some money. At the very least, here's this, here's that.
Yeah, I mean, I think those are good questions, and I think that there's been an attempt to reach a settlement on those questions in prior negotiations, but I think the issue is from the Palestinian side, nothing except for like full unconditional right of return for all recognized refugees of that number, which is 6 million plus right now, is acceptable. So there is no just compensation or anything absent everybody going back to where they lived before. So
I mean, in an ideal world, what? Okay, well, I mean, we can go back and we'll come back to this, but like, so my whole stance is that evidence strongly shows that the intention was to continue to take the land over and over again.
Yeah, but hold on. We have to be. When we speak about intentions, we have to be a little bit more sophisticated when we're talking about countries, right? So, like, intentions are going to dynamically change as situations progress. So, somebody might have an intent to do a particular thing, but confronted with another thing, that intention doesn't matter anymore. It's going to change, right? And I think that there is clear examples, there's clear evidence in Israeli history where their intention for taking land disappeared. They didn't want any more land because they were worried about aggression from neighbors and their inability to even hold what they had. Like there were times, I think it was 48. During that war, where they were aware of the demographic issues in the West Bank. And I think that a lot of the advancing of the military stopped because Ben-Gurion and other Israeli leaders were like, we can't do this. This is untenable. And even in 67, when Jordan was coming into attack after that conflict began, after Israel bombed the Egyptian airfields, like Israel told Jordan, like, please don't attack. Don't do this. Don't do this. Don't do this. And Jordan decided to anyway, and that's when they lost the West Bank. So, I mean, like, these are examples where it's like, well, Israel wanted all that land. I imagine they would just go and take it all.
But you answered something very important, which you said, like, they don't really have the population for it. They don't have enough resources for it to continue. So what did they do in lieu of that? Are they
wouldn't do it typically, usually, right? But
are they slow? Here's what they're actually doing, right? Are they slowly allowing people who have never stepped foot in Israel, who have some magical connection to the land from thousands of years ago, which frankly, as you, I believe you're non-religious too, know that we all were there at some point, right? We all came from certain parts together because we all evolved from one area. So this idea of like, hey, along the way, they stopped there for a little bit, and so now we're going to claim that that's ours forever in eternity. So this ideology of like, some guy who's literally never been there, his family's never been there for thousands of years, can come in and say, hey, I'm going to come back and I'm going to take it. So what is Israel doing? They're allowing these people to come in little by little to expand their population. They're allowing the hilltop youth to go into the West Bank and to build settlements little by little. They're doing, when you say like, what's their intention? Do we know if they want to continue? We do know. The settlements are active proof of that. Now, where you're right,
hold on, wait. We got to be really careful on timelines. Yeah, because 67 onwards, I think that Israel wanted the West Bank and they wanted to start to do that. And obviously, from 2000 and onwards, the goal has been the slow encroachment of more and more settlers, more demographic majority, more annexation of the West Bank. That's undeniable. Yeah.
Yeah, so what you're saying is the only thing you don't have proof for is between 48 and 67, there could have been this period where they wanted to slow it down. But the evidence of after 67 and before 48, all of it shows that they want to continue to take Palestine. So this idea that like, okay, maybe they shifted for a little bit, I mean, sure.
Well, it's not that they shifted, and it's not like, well, this happened. Like, big things happened. In 48, all the Arab states went to war to try to get rid of... Yeah?
But they can cause their intention. You're saying as if, like, they decided, you know what? Scratch everything. We don't want it all. We're content here, and we'll be content here forever. what it seemed like, logically, is, hey, right now we don't have the ability to expand. Right now we don't have the ability to take on more land. And in 67 and moving forward, as people started migrating back in again, as everything started to calm down, it was great, let's get back to our original plan. So this idea of like, you're playing this game of like, we don't really know their true intentions, and they're going to change, and they're very dynamic when the intention from this get-go was to take it all. The intention from 67
I think
onwards
it's
to
just,
take it all.
It's just too naive of you. I think that 48 onwards, I think what Israel wanted was wanting all of the mandatory Palestine area. They knew that realistically they couldn't do that for a variety of reasons. But like, what's he saying? Like, try me or whatever. Basically, given the opportunity to expand, if their neighbors make mistakes, they will. And I think that's what we saw happen over and over and over again. Was their neighbors were incapable of using diplomacy. They were way too bent on constant war and aggression. And as a result of those military and diplomatic missteps, they lost tracts of land in that process, going to war, trying to eliminate an enemy, and then losing those wars. Now, because truly the question would be, is absent the Arab aggression, would Israel have continued to conquer land? I'm not convinced that that would be the case because of the deals that Israel did accept leading up to most of these wars.
But that's a ridiculous statement to say, like, the only reason that they're encroaching on West Bank right now is because, you know, Arab aggression. Otherwise, it would have been perfectly content.
Wait, what do you mean?
Because the idea that, like, taking West Bank is going to somehow stop Arab aggression is completely incorrect.
Well, that was the whole point. The point was because it's a huge buffer then. There are a ton of times you read Israeli historians, they use this phrase, and they used it a lot in the 40s and 50s, the rib cage of Tel Aviv. The idea that there were scant a few kilometers between the shores of the Mediterranean and where the West Bank territory was an incredibly frightful thing for them, right? You can shell the Tel Aviv literally from the West Bank. So after 67, this war happens, you get invaders from this area who continue to try to eliminate you as a country. Yeah, I think the argument for taking this territory and having it as like a buffer, whether it's mean or not, like it makes sense, right?
Why does the buffer ironically stop at the West Bank border?
Because the River Jordan. What do you mean? There's a river there. That's where it would naturally end, right?
They can't get on the other side of the river.
Really, I mean, they could.
Wouldn't having a buffer on the other side of the river help significantly?
It doesn't. No, it doesn't matter.
North into Lebanon or south?
Wait. Hold on. Well, some of the things you're talking about are true. Some of the things you're talking about are not true. So having a buffer on the east side of the river, one, it would be very difficult to defend because now your supply lines have to stretch over that Allenby Bridge. There's a bridge over River Jordan at this point. Yeah. So one, you'd have to be supplying past the river, so that's already more complicated. And then two, you'd be crossing into Jordan territory proper, which would be a lot more of an instigation. So that didn't make sense to cross past River Jordan. And then secondly, you mentioned, well, what about up in Syria? Well, the Golan Heights.
Hold on. But why more of an instigation? Isn't West Bank an instigation of itself? Why? Again,
no, wait, hold on. No, it's not an instigation. Because Jordan never owned properly that territory. They conquered that territory in 48.
You're saying that their encroachment into West Bank right now is not causing contention in the Middle East?
Not with Jordan, no.
Jordan is playing a different game because of obviously their relations with it, so there's that.
Sure, but Jordan is also 2/3 Palestinians, right? I mean, Jordan is the most Palestinian country besides Palestine, so...
Yeah, no, 100%. But the thing is it's ironically going to the exact borders that they had wanted from the start.
Well, but I mean, like, the exact borders from the start weren't arbitrary. The exact borders from the start kind of make sense that, like, you draw borders along, like, rivers and stuff, right? When Israel conquered down the peninsula...
What's the river between Lebanon and Palestine?
The river between Lebanon and Palestine, I'm not 100% sure. I'd have to go and look at the border up there, but I know that, like, the Golan Heights, the expansion to that was also a geographical expansion, right? The reason why they expanded the Golan Heights is because it could shell into Israel from those heights.
There's definitely a mixture of obviously, like, military, you know, advancement of, like, having certain places. But this idea of, like, now you're trying to point of, like, look, they're not taking it to take it. They're only doing it for their safety. While they've said over and over again, before Arab intervention, before Arab attacking, that they wanted to take it all. And then now you're shifting it to, like, no, they're only taking it for just their safety. Their safety the only reason that they are in this position in the first place is because they came in and started taking land from Palestinians, or started encroaching and expanding and pushing out Arabs and basically working with themselves and only hiring Jewish people and only buying from Jewish people and slowly expanding.
Well, so firstly, they didn't only buy from Jewish people; they bought from a lot of the Arab landowners. That's sort of the majority of the land was purchased.
No. I mean like goods and services to prop up Jewish businesses.
Well, I think they would buy. I'm pretty sure they would trade with Arabs as well, but Arabs wouldn't trade with them.
If they needed to. They needed to.
Well, but Arabs wouldn't trade with them. They wouldn't even recognize that as a country, right? From post 48, they wouldn't recognize it as a country, right?
Hey, before that, I'm talking in the 1910, 1916, 1920, 1912.
I don't know what the status of trade was in the early 1900s, in the early 20th century. I'm not sure if they would or wouldn't. But also, when you mention like only hiring Jewish laborers too, I mean, like that's I mean, it's an idea of like conquest of labor from Jews, secular Zionism or labor Zionism. But also, isn't that probably better? Like, would it have been better if Jewish people were hiring Arabs to work for them on land that they had bought from them? It seems like people would then accuse them of like slavery or indentured servitude. Sorry.
No, because Jewish people at the time, let me give the exact number. I think there was 13,000 Jewish people, 400,000 Arabs in 1890, around there, maybe 1910, somewhere around there. I might be off a little on that,
Sure,
but they lived there working among Arabs, right? So Jewish people lived there, worked jobs. My grandmother, her great-grandmother, I sat and talked with her. I just did an interview with my best friend's grandmother from the same town as my grandmother. They're like, yeah, we lived with Jewish people. My grandmother was friends with Jewish people. They worked with us. They did this. So to come in and change the status quo of like we're all living together to this is a Jewish compound and we're basically going to buy and kick out Arabs and we're going to expand. It doesn't set a nice precedent for the neighboring areas, the neighboring tribes, neighboring villages.
Sure, I agree that like I think that the British mandate and them promising Jews the ability to set up a homeland in there, I think that was probably a big mistake on the British side of things. But I mean, none of the fingers ever seem to get pointed at Britain.
Have you read the letters from the generals and the people on the ground in Palestine at the time, sending back to Britain about like, that whole conquest? 1936, I think.
36. They're talking about the Peel Commission or Peel.
No. Before that, there was basically letters. It's really interesting. This is not even like a debate part, but it's very interesting to read what these like military leaders in Palestine who were in control of like Mandate Palestine at the time were writing. About the situation and the land, and they were all actually like arguing of like they didn't know how to divide up the land, and they didn't know what part to give to Palestine, things like that. But my whole issue is that like coming from day one, it was the expansion, the exclusion of Arabs, right, kicking them out basically, whether you bought it or not, right? You're kicking them out. You're only hiring Jewish people. You're trying not to work with Arabs unless you have to, unless you need to survive, and slowly expanding. So the neighboring tribes and the neighboring villages understood what was happening. It was very clear what was happening is that they were going to slowly take over, and they were going to expand. And so, as they started to go, and then this is something that we talk about in one of the books. I think Anita Shapira talks about this, but basically they started to encroach on actual Palestinian villages and things like that around the Wailing Wall and Jerusalem and all these different places, and starting to expand. And this is where all that contention started building up.
Sure, but I mean, like we have to understand that the foundationally, and I guess this feels bad, but foundationally, the sound that I get when we have this conversation is that there was a country of Palestine that the Palestinians owned and the Jews invaded. But that isn't really what happened. The Ottoman Empire collapsed. Britain had a mandate to administer to this territory, and through that administration, a lot of Jews came in, and the people that lived there understandably felt shitty. But I mean, like, the same mandate system is what led to the creation of basically every single other, like, neighboring country, right? Iraq came from a mandatory system. Jordan, transfer to Jordan came from that. Like all of these other, like that's just, Britain was the one running that territory, and by the end, the expiration of the mandates, they would turn it over to whatever stable governments had basically emerged from the territory. But I mean, like it sucks if you were a Palestinian and you got kicked out of there. I definitely think that that's a shitty thing. It wasn't ultra abnormal in the world. I mean, you have like, I'm sure the Armenian genocide was around 1920. You had the huge transfer between like Turkey and. Right. Sure, I understand. I'm not saying it makes it normal or right. It's definitely a shitty thing. It's complicated for how should it have played out in terms of like should Britain have allowed anybody to move there or not. That's again complicated. I feel like the overpromising between the Balfour Declaration.
They didn't matter. They were migrating before, right? They were migrating. That was just more of like they were migrating before.
I don't think much migration really happened until that Balfour Declaration came in place.
No, there was a good amount actually from 1880 to 19. 1916.
I think from 1880 to 1916, your first two Aliyahs, the first one I think was like a total failure. I think the second one had a few more people come in because there was a bit more funding, but I think it was especially after 1917 you had a lot of people that started to come in.
For sure more. Let's see. It increased double the population from 1880 to 1900.
Double the Jewish population, though?
Yes.
Yeah,
the number of Jews began to increase during late Ottoman Empire, increasing from 24,000 to 50,000, so doubling the number from 1880 to 1900. And then from 1900 to 1914, again, Balfour Declaration, it went to 85,000. So this idea like they were not really migrating, it was a failure. You literally went up 300%, 400% in a matter of like 3 decades.
Well, I would have to check for the first Aliyah. I think a lot of those people ended up just fucking off and going back home. I don't know how many of them even ended up staying. I would have to check. But like, I'm not saying that there was no migration. I'm just saying that compared to it was, I think 1916 afterwards.
Comparison is irrelevant. If there's a 400% increase of a population in your area, and they're expanding significantly, it's very obvious what's going to happen. So this is pre-Balfour Declaration in your area in the Ottoman Empire, and you're going, wait, what the hell's going on? Why is there 400% more people coming in, taking over the land, again, buying from each other only, working with each other only,
sure,
and being like, okay, this,
people.
This,
people are coming in. But at that point, I mean, they really have no right to complain, especially prior to 1917, right? It's because that all happened under the Ottoman Empire. Right?
Yeah. I'm not trying to say like, sure, we can say like the Ottoman Empire should have stopped them.
And then also, we keep saying like 400% increase in Jews. The percentage of Jews are increased, but there were hundreds of thousands of Arabs living there, even in the early 1900s, weren't there?
Yeah, like 600,000.
Yeah. So like when you say like increase 400%, they're still less than like I think 20%.
No. I'm not trying to say like they're the majority, but when they're coming in, like what I'm trying to say is it all points to a very obvious fact that they came in with intention, right? We can do the whole Theodore Herzl bullshit and the WTO and all that stuff, which is their intention was to come and take over land and set up a state.
Yeah,
100%.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, that's what they want. That's the point of the Balfour Declaration. Is like we want a state in this area. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Well. You going into a place, whether the Ottomans own it, whether the Britons own it, whether Palestinians live there, you are going in there with intention to disrupt people's lives. There's no way that you can go into somewhere and go, listen, I'm going to go into Africa and I'm going to set up a state. I have no intention to hurt anyone, bother anyone, or that is illusion.
Well, I don't think anybody's ever said that. Obviously, you're buying land and you're taking farmers and stuff out. Yeah, of course. People that are getting kicked out probably don't feel good about it. Yeah, of course.
Right. So now we're getting this intention of they're starting to. Yeah, and this is what Ben Gurion talks about a lot, which he said in one of his quotes. He said, whether we buy it from them or kick them out or intimidate them, the idea was to buy land in the beginning. This is what Ben Gurion talks about. And to basically use that to surround other areas and intimidate them to basically sell it for pennies or leave.
Yeah.
And so this was a strategic play. And so this idea of building up to like 1948 where like all these Arabs just like came and attacked out of nowhere, like ain't enough to say that he said this. But like anti-Arabs are just gonna come in and attack. It's like no, the intention was that everyone was idiots. They understand what was happening. They understand that the Jewish population that was coming in, not the existing one that lived there peacefully, but these Europeans were coming in, these people from around the world coming in to basically encroach on the land, take it from people, intimidate them, and take it. Which is why Plan D has evidence of it being built for years. Of we're gonna make sure that we know where all these militants are, what they were, their ages, and they had basically people going around to villages marking down everything. And it didn't take a year to do that. It took a long time to catalog every village in the area.
Yeah, people are cataloging stuff. Yeah, of course. But I mean, like the White Paper 39, the Peel Commission in 36, the correspondences prior to this. Like, yeah,
this was not a country.
Well, no, but I mean, everybody's going to be, of course, keeping track of all of these things.
Who? Like a group of people? Like is the city of?
Well, the Jews
starting to keep track of New York and they keep track of their population. Why would they do that if it wasn't a country at the time? If they didn't,
because they wanted to make a country, right? Of course, they wanted to make a country. Yeah. The contention here isn't whether or not they wanted to set up a country. That's not the contention. The contention is when they set up that country, how big they want it to be, and was the plan from the beginning always to expel all of the Arabs? That's the issue.
Yeah. So do you know why a lot of the Arabs live in Israel today? Why they're still there? Like why? Because a lot of people, maybe we disagree.
Because
on this or don't
Israel
disagree,
didn't expel every single Arab. I think some might have came back.
But why didn't? Why? Because this is evidence. Not to say that you use this again, Chad. I always like to be clear. So I hear this debate of like, well, if they wanted to get rid of every Arab, then why are there so many Arabs living in Israel today?
Why didn't they? I think that they were. I mean, if the village was not like actively engaged in military conflict, I don't think they were as interested in expelling those people. And then if they were outside of like the major roads to like from Jerusalem and stuff to Tel Aviv, they probably didn't mess with them as much. But for the specific ones that stayed, I don't know the reason why the ones that did stay, they didn't explicitly get expelled.
Yeah. So to be clear, they didn't want any of them, and you can understand that there's some reason to have them there if you are trying to create a secure nation, right? Like whether they're peaceful or not, you just don't want them there. And their plan was to not have them there. The only reason those villages stayed was those were the areas specifically that Lebanon had invaded 48, Egypt, Jordan. Those were the places, because a lot of people think, by the way, and this is a misconception, we can bring on the historian on this, that all the Arabs attacked. That's not true. It was actually largely just Palestinians fighting Jewish militias and the Haganah and all those different militias. It was not.
I don't think
that's a very big misconception. I'll cite all those sources and send them to you.
Wait, hold on. Just to be clear, my feeling on, and I haven't done a ton of pre-48 history, is I'm pretty sure the Palestinians kind of lost their will to fight in 39. I think that the big Arab revolts that happened from 36 to 39, I think there were a lot of middle-class Arabs, like people that had money, that were influential, that ended up fleeing after that.
No, I agree. Which is why 48 war didn't last very long.
Yeah, exactly. But then when we talk about like who was fighting from, so you had the internal civil war from like 47 to 49, but in 48, of course, Arab states came in to fight. I mean,
so that's a big misconception. Again, I'll bring on the historian. We'll talk about this because I want it to be very factual, to give the exact details and citations of everything. But that's a big misconception. It was very similar to like basically Ukraine and the United States of just kind of giving them some weapons, giving them some money, and not doing very much. And the only reason that the certain villages stayed that were Arabs in the Israeli region were the areas that like Lebanon and Jordan and Egypt kind of sent them and said, okay, we're creating a buffer for our own country. We're going to go in and protect a couple different villages here and there.
Absolutely not. No shot. That's impossible. Without even knowing the record, I know that's not true, because if they were able to protect those villages, they would just take them over. And how can you say they didn't invade when Egypt invaded the Gaza Strip and took it over? Or when Jordan invaded the West Bank and took it over? How can we say that they didn't invade? They literally did. That wasn't any of their territory. They must have marched armies there, and there were armistices drawn up between all three countries, I think.
Yeah, I want to bring on the historian to actually cite to everything so we can go over this, because no, that is actually true. And
well, wait, then in your mind, how is it? Why Egypt conquered the Gaza Strip, right? Jordan conquered the West Bank, right? We agree with that, right?
Oh, like 30 years later on, yeah.
No, in 48.
Sure.
So how could we say they didn't invade or they didn't attack if they conquered?
Because there's a difference between invading all the way into, because you're saying that so what you're saying is they only went into the Gaza Strip, they didn't even go into the part of Israel.
My understanding is they went into about as far as they could. And then they stopped.
Yes. Yeah. That's right.
Yeah, and then once they got that far, they took the land. So Egypt conquered the Gaza Strip. That wasn't their territory.
But they didn't go. But they went in. But those are the villages too. A lot of those villages that had stayed were just support of those countries. So when people say like Egypt went into huge parts of Israel and they all started attacking, it was like a lot less intense than people thought it was.
I think they were pretty intense. They got farther than the Gaza Strip. They got Gaza Strip. They got further than. I think. I want to say they were close to Tel Aviv. No, I mean, like, Israel was starting to ship in a ton of weapons from Czechoslovakia. They started to fight back. They were able to push back. And then where the lines were drawn, those lines that were drawn, the borders after 48, those are armistice lines. Those are where the militaries had fought up to and were chilling on both sides of. That's what that was. So, I mean, like, they pushed pretty...
I'm talking about... I'm not saying within Palestine, within Israel. The partition of Israel.
Well, there was no partition at that point, right? It was just territory that...
The lines, but the lines that they had arbitrary, because those lines are very similar to the lines that we have had.
True, but those lines weren't arbitrary. They were drawn because that's where, like, the majority of Jewish villages were. That's why they drew So, of course, those are going to be about where they defend, because that's where they already are anyway, right?
Yeah, I'm not saying Egypt didn't go into Palestine. They didn't go into Israel, the area that Israel took over at that time.
Well, hold on, but they did go into it. Israel, they didn't make it any further because Israel fought for it. These were, again, all the countries, if the Arab countries thought they could have won completely, then they would have expelled every person that came in from Europe from that place. They would have won and they would have conquered, they would have destroyed the country. They would have destroyed Israel completely. But, like, there was a lot of fighting for Jerusalem, and I think there was fighting close to Tel Aviv. I think Egypt. I'd have to go and check the exact like where the armistice lines went. But yeah, there was a lot of fighting that pushed a lot. They didn't stop because they got bored or whatever, but because they were satisfied with their territorial gains, and then they ended up chilling and they got pushed back by the early pre-IDF the Yishuv fighting.
But that's a big part of why there are Arabs in Israel today. And this is, again, it just repeats the point of like. And I guess you agree with this, which is like their intention when they first moved was to take over.
Which villages? Or like, do you know any cities or areas that, I'm asking for a very specific thing here, but like, where did Arabs live in 1948 Israel? I've never ever heard this put forth before, that the only reason the Arabs remained here were because other Arab countries were defending them. That doesn't. Where did they live in villages? Western Galilee.
But anyway, so while you're pulling that up, we can go back to it whenever you want. But my point overall is that this idea that from the beginning they wanted to take over all the land. They wanted to continue to take all the land. There's evidence of Ben Gurion talking about this over and over again, and then now they continue to do that in the West Bank. So this idea of like Arab aggression came out of nowhere, and they just started.
Wait, hold on, just to be clear. I never said it came out of nowhere. They had reasons to fight, and that was they wanted.
Do you think those reasons were justified?
I'm like 50-50 on it. I mean, like I wouldn't say completely unjustified. I mean, you basically have what you feel is like a foreign invader that's destroying your goal for creating like some unified Arab state, and you want to destroy this country and take them all out. I mean, I think they've got it. But I think the Jews have their reasons too. I think they're also justified, so it's kind of complicated.
Well, I don't think they're justified in taking someone else's land, but they may be justified in like, hey, we're getting.
Well, they're justified in that, like, one, everything they had before the collapse of the Ottoman Empire, they bought under the Ottoman Empire. So at the very least, that was justified. And I'm pretty sure the majority of the land they
5%.
did buy. Sure, the majority of, well, but the rest of that land was state-owned. It wasn't like inhabited by Palestinian villages, right? This is just like...
I'm literally living fact of, yes, it was not just state-owned. I have paperwork of that. My entire family has paperwork of that. All of my cousins have paperwork of that. We all own hundreds of thousands of acres. So this idea of like you saying like, oh, this is like a common misconception.
No, wait. Own hundreds of thousands of acres of what?
Land.
From who? Who sold you this?
During that time, I could pull up the paperwork of the 1932 one, but regardless of who sold it to them,
well, that's kind of important.
The paperwork for we lived on it. For example, we lived on it.
Just because you live someplace doesn't give you like territorial rights to the place, though.
So would that give territorial rights for Jewish people to come in and take it?
Well, no. They purchased it from the other people that owned it, and that was the majority.
No. You keep going back to the 5%. There were tons and tons of areas where they took over where Palestinians lived. I think that you keep missing that. I don't know why you keep doing that. As if you're
because that area that hold on, wait. Because that area where they took that land, they took that in war. They didn't just like come in and be like, leave now, we're expelling you. And that was a war that happened. And then the borders changed after the war. I'm not going to deny that. Of course that happened. But it was a military. Yeah, it was a war.
But during that, okay. But this idea of like, okay, well they took it in war, so your idea is like as long as they take something in war, it's there, they can have it, correct?
I mean, that's kind of shitty. I mean, I don't know if, but I mean, it's also, I don't know what else the alternative is right now, because I think what happened...
That's the alternative of saying then like, and I don't want to get into that because it's the whole thing, but like, Hamas could do whatever they want to Israel. As long as they take it over, that's just war. They get that, take the land. Like,
well, I think in 2024, we're living by a significantly different playbook now than we were in the 1940s. But I think the issue is that as Jewish people started to build up there, and the partition plan came about in 47, it was a result of the Peel Commission in 36 saying that, like, okay, well, this is clearly not workable. I don't know why, but for some reason, the Brits deluded themselves into thinking that some sort of, like, unified state could work there, but there was huge differences that were starting to bubble over between the Arab and the Jewish people that lived there. And it wasn't working, so they're like, okay, well, fuck it, now we've got to divide this place. But, I mean, at that point, then what do you do?
What do you do as, like, Jewish people?
Sure, I guess it's Jewish people and as Arabs. For Arabs, I guess they probably want to fight for their land.
So do you think it'd be justified for the Jewish people to be like, hey, the current 5% we own today, we're fine staying on it because that's the stuff that we bought?
No, I don't think you're going to be content staying on 5% of land when everyone around there is trying to kill you.
But why were they trying to kill them?
Because they just didn't like them moving over into the mandatory Palestine area.
In what way, though? Like, they just didn't like them because they were Jewish, or what?
I think mainly.
Do you think they fully moved in there peacefully? They never disrupted
My
anyone? They
view
never hurt
is that early on they didn't like them because they were Europeans. I do think might have been a little bit of it, but I think it's mainly because they were Europeans. And they viewed them as a threat to forming a contiguous like Arab state, like a big unified Arab state.
No, it wasn't just because at that time you're not having like the neighboring countries be like, oh, we're so worried about this. It's the people who lived there that were getting kicked out of their homes. That were, like I said, it was basically saying like, hey, we're only going to work with, it's like segregation. We're only going to work with Jewish people. You get out. You're not supposed to live here. We're kicking you out. If I buy land and you're a renter, you're gone based on just your ethnicity, not based on anything else. Like we're kicking you out based on you being Arab, and then we're only going to allow Jewish people to live there, which we even see today.
Well, when you say kick them out for being Arab, it's because all the Arabs wanted to fight against all the Jews. That was the issue, right? So of course, at some point that.
In the 1910?
No, but like in the 1920s and onwards, there started to become a lot of violence.
But 1910, when they were buying land in 1800s, 1880, 1900, 1910, 1905, when they're buying that land and kicking out Arabs, and saying like, hey, because of your ethnicity, you're gone.
They bought the land. It was their land to own. They wanted to move in their people and live on the land that they bought.
So you're of the mindset that it's okay for someone to buy land and kick people out based on race?
No, it's not about based on race. It's just about based on.
So they didn't kick them out because they were Arab.
I think they just kicked them out because they were the people that lived there and they wanted to move in their own people. I think it ends up being on racial lines because who besides like Arabs generally lived in most of these places, but.
You're playing it. That's your really roundabout way of saying like, oh well, they moved in their cousins, so it wasn't like a racial thing. It just happened to be a racial thing. It was literally written in the book of why they came in the first place. It was their plan of the WZO. This was their intention to do that. Their intention
when you
was
say
to come in and
race,
say,
is the race like what is the race here?
Oh, religion, race. I mean, the whole Jewish
well, there's
thing
difference. I mean, like, because they wanted Jews there, mainly the people that they were bringing in from. I mean, there was a lot from the Russian Empire. There was a lot from Europe. But like.
Yeah. So if you were Arab, you were gone. You were kicked out of the area.
If you were not Jewish, you were kicked out. Yes.
Yeah. But that in itself is problematic.
Why?
You don't. So you'd be okay with people operating like that today?
I don't think so. No, today I'm pretty sure that would be a violation of like tons of. I don't think we allow people.
Forget violation of like laws. Like just from your perspective, would that raise questions, problems in your area?
It's hard to imagine. I mean, are they buying this land from the United States, or are they buying?
Sure. Let's just say like. I don't want to keep like pointing at you because I want people to build up this hatred towards that. But like, I don't know. Just say
everybody hits them anyway. Fuck them. I mean, like if somebody bought the United States and said we're gonna kick out all the Christians.
Well, not bought the United States.
Like, or bought like Florida. Bought Miami Beach. I live in Miami Beach. Let's say Cuba bought Miami Beach. And let's say Raul, I don't know who the fuck Castro's kid is, whoever's in power right now. Let's say he was like, yeah, we're kicking out all the Christians or whatever. I'd say, yeah, that's pretty weird. Probably not good. I don't think.
Well, not Christians, right? They didn't kick out Christians and just Muslims or just Christians. They kicked out Arabs.
Well, no, they were kicking out. Well, no, because they would have accepted the Jewish people that had already lived there. The Jewish people that lived there before the Balfour Declaration weren't like Ashkenazi Jews, right? These were like, weren't they like Sephardic?
Mizrahim.
And whatever. The colorful ones. So I mean, like they would have accepted those people. But the Arabs were still violent towards those people too. So I mean, like that's kind of a
But that's the thing is like this idea of like when you say like, oh, they were just violent towards them, and you don't give the preconditions of why they were violent in the first place. It's like you're setting the precedent for your audience and for people out there that like, dude, like the Jewish people are just like moving in, doing their thing, and then like the Arabs just got all mad and like started hating them for no reason.
Reading too much into what I've said, I'm sympathetic towards what you're saying because that is what a lot of people say, and I agree with that. But I've given this. Like, well, I've gone over this a lot on stream, that, like, I understand why Arabs in the region wanted to fight. I can understand that. I'm sympathetic towards that. Like, I might even, like, that's why I'm, like, 50-50 on it. I'm not like, oh, they were completely wrong. Like, I've said this over and over and over
That's why I wanted to talk to you, by the way. It was, when I watched one stream, because I only watched, like, 2 or 3 streams, one of them was, like, seemed pro-Palestine and hated using terms. And then, like, the next one, it was you were debating, what's his name? But where then I was like, okay, now I'm confused. I don't know. So you agree though, like that might be 50-50, but that intention, Arabs had a justification for
fighting
back, for trying to get their land back, things like that, and then leading up until when do you feel like that shifted?
Well, hold on. You can have because international stuff is complicated, right? Because we can't all appeal to the same system of justice because we've got competing drives between different peoples. It's complicated, right? Do you agree that the Jewish people had good reason to want to move and good justification for wanting to buy land and move to Palestine? That when they did it under the Ottoman Empire, when they got the agreements from the British, that when they realized they were getting Holocausted in Europe, do you think they had good reason to want to move to Palestine?
Yeah, so I think there's two sets to that. There's like internal reason, there's internal answers and external answers, which is like one of them is like, hey, internally it makes sense why we want to move, but to be like, oh, but there are people living there, but who gives a shit? Okay, so what? You're gonna pass those problems on to another group of people, and now they should take the hit?
So what was the more moral thing for Jewish people to do when they're getting Holocausted? And then when they got agreements from Britain to like, hey, can we move in this land? What should they have done?
So did you read Theodore Herzl's book?
No, fuck no. That guy loses died like that.
But you know that, like, obviously that was the start of a lot of this. You never read it to understand, like, that mindset? Or him talking about going to places in Africa? Many places
I think you've gone to...
well over enough room to fit the size of Israel without disrupting literally anyone?
Yeah, but I think the conditions there and there were multiple reasons why they ended up not setting
No. But you have to read his book. So this is what he talks about. He says basically the main reason was that they felt that they had. He goes, look, and then this is what he's read in his book. We have ties to the land. We had been there before. We've got some, religious monuments there. We might as well just go there. We have ties to that land. So, do you think that it's reasonable that there was no other place on Earth that they could go to set up a home? Is that your...
the Ottoman Empire was allowing them to purchase territory, was allowing them to buy land, and then the British people, after 1917, said that you can go and set shit up there. And it was like the easiest one, I'm pretty sure, to get their people to travel over to. So they ended up settling on Palestine. Yeah.
You're saying there's no other place that they could have... You're saying Palestine was the easiest and only place they could have gone.
I'm not saying only, but in terms of like the one that was like probably the most like reasonable in terms of guaranteeing their success, yeah, probably.
That's not true.
You think that a group of Jews living in Africa would have been successful, and they would have resisted all of the external pressures and everybody fighting them there, and like...
Well, I'm not even saying just Africa. That's what Theodore Herzl I talked about. There's literally many places on Earth, and your justification is like, well, listen, they had to take it. There was no other place they can go. They needed to push off the Arabs. It's the only place they can go.
Why did the Palestinians need to stay? They have the whole Ottoman Empire. They could have gone to 50 different Muslim majority countries that were surrounding them. Why do they need to stay in Palestine? Like,
but then your point now is like, dude, they should just move and give the land to Jewish people.
No, that's never mind my point. My question, what we got here from my initial question, my question was just like, do you think that the Jewish people's actions were reasonable from the late 19th century up
reasonable to say, hey, we want to leave and go somewhere else. Not reasonable to say, let me pass that headache and that problem onto a group of people that did nothing to you in that sense, and let's take over their land.
They already had their land. Hold on, you keep mixing so many things up. The Jews didn't take over that land. Britain did. It wasn't the Palestinians' land. The Ottoman Empire.
In 1900, Britain owned it?
No, the Ottoman Empire owned it.
Okay.
So it was never their land to give or to whatever. It was the Ottoman Empire's land to administer to, which they did, which is why Jews bought most of the land that they ended up buying before buying, not taking over, but buying before.
Who did they buy it from? You keep saying it like they bought it directly from the Ottoman Empire.
They bought, well, I think that the Ottoman Empire would loan out the lands to other people that would buy them and collect rents and stuff, and the Jewish... There was a name for this group of Jewish people that were raising capital basically to buy land, but it bought land off the people who were basically holding the rights to the land in the Ottoman Empire.
Do you think Palestinians had all owned any land in there when they lived there?
There were Arabs that owned land there, but they were like middle class, wealthy Arabs or wealthier Arabs. So like, if they sold the land, they didn't give a fuck. They're not getting kicked off. I'm pretty sure most of the Palestinians that lived there from like 1900 to 1920 were like subsistence farmers, basically. Like they had small villages, they raised food for themselves, and they was basically that. Yeah.
And this is, I mean, this is something that actually is like something that everyone needs to take a look at, which is the idea of like, well, the Ottoman Empire owned it, or Britain took it over during a war, so now it's theirs to give out. That's where I draw my line where I go, well, that's not right. The people who are living there, who have lived there for thousands of years, continuously.
I don't even know if they live there continuously. People have shuffled between like tons of different districts in the Ottoman Empire for the whole history. The only reason they had it there is because the Ottoman Empire conquered it in the 1500s, or not 1500s, in the 600s or 500s or whatever.
Not to say that these DNA tests are always accurate, but many of them never left. Like I did my DNA test. I don't know if you believe in that.
I believe in DNA.
So like, let me just cross out my name. So like,
what?
So like my, well, that's freaking that.
Your top tower has been destroyed.
There we go. So anyway, my family had been there. We have I just 100% Levantine. I've nothing in there. And like that's my point is like you're kicking out people that have lived there actively.
You just showed me. You just showed me like 5 different countries.
Yeah, because I'm half Lebanese, half Palestinian. So break it down like my mom did hers only Palestine on my dad.
I don't think there is a Palestinian ethnic. I don't think that is like a real thing. I think when you look at the GWASP or whatever and you overlap that, like the Syrians, Jordanians, Palestinians, all like pretty closely intertwined. Like, that's why that map that just showed you a group of like 5. I thought you said Levant and not Palestine, because Levantine people exist all up and down this area.
Yeah, but and also because those DNA tests aren't accurate, so that's the exact borders, like you said, those borders didn't really exist.
Well, and because DNA was kind of traced like approximately. Like, types of blood. Yeah, they're not going to be traced.
But this is my thing though, is like this idea of like we're gonna go back there, we're gonna take over land that people lived on. That's just my contention is very simple. And like you said, the Arabs had a justification for fighting back.
Sure, but you don't think Jews had any justification for moving there? They were wrong to buy it. They were wrong for the Balfour Declaration.
But that's what I'm saying. You cannot say like they can do that because you're on one side. You're saying these guys had a right because what they were doing. If they had a right, it means whatever the person was doing is wrong. Correct?
No. That's why I prefaced that with international stuff is really complicated.
So
if there's a country next to you and they have like slavery, do you have a right to invade that country to end the slavery? I mean, it's a complicated question because different nations can have different laws, and we might find some bad. Yeah, so
if I'm getting kicked out of my home here in California, I should be able to go break into your home and take it. Whether I buy a part of it and then I intimidate you to get the rest of it.
If you get kicked out of your home by the California government, you have a right to take up arms from Georgia and engage in warfare against the California government?
No. But that's not what happened. They didn't take up arms and fight Germany or fight any of these places in Europe. They came to a completely different nation, a group of people, and then started causing problems there.
Well, but the initial acquisition was done through purchases, and then it was done through essentially the Balfour Declaration. It wasn't done through conquering.
Well. I'm going pre-Balfour Declaration.
Okay, so then them buying it, so then the Ottoman Empire and the people that own the land were wrong for selling it, even though they had the rights to sell it, and the Jewish people were wrong for buying it.
No, and this is the thing. This is what Ben Gurion talks about, right? Their plan was to initially buy...
No, wait. I want to know very, very, very specifically. Was it wrong for Jewish people to buy land when the Ottoman Empire was administering the land?
Yes, I'm going to answer. So initially, their plan was to buy bits of that land and then use intimidation tactics and basically warfare in these tribes and these villages to get other pieces of land, whether they forced the Arabs out locally or they bought it for cheap by intimidation.
Okay, so I'm going to ask again. Were the Jewish people wrong for buying land under the Ottoman Empire?
Yes. Doing that, yes.
So they shouldn't have. So buying the land. So no, we're not talking about intimidation. We're just talking about buying land. Were they wrong for buying land?
The initial one piece of going like, hey, I'm going to buy this small piece of land and we're going to live on it, and then now we're going to expand by pushing out Arabs. We're going to intimidate local Arabs. We're going to take the land from them. Whether they leave, we intimidate them, or we just take it, or we try and buy it for pennies on the dollar because we're intimidating them. Yes, that is all wrong.
Okay, wait. So let me. I'm trying to get this one single fact. Okay, I feel like pro-Palestinians are like allergic to like discreetly looking at events. It has to always come with like a Palestinian excuse afterwards. So it's a very simple. Was it okay for them to buy land from the Ottoman Empire? Just a super simple question. Just that. Nothing that comes before or after. But was it okay for Jewish people to buy land from the Ottoman Empire?
Yeah, because Jewish people lived there. Some Jewish people that lived there. Yes.
Wait, why does it matter if some Jewish people live there?
No, I'm saying yes. Like, obviously it's fine. Yes, they had lived there before. They didn't have problems before they lived there.
So foreign Jews buying land from the Ottoman Empire was okay.
If people were moving in, now if there's a difference between having a couple thousand versus a million come in and buy a piece of land and then now start expanding.
Wait, why? If they're buying it from the Ottoman Empire, why does it matter?
Because they didn't just buy it from the Ottoman Empire. It wasn't just like this like nice, sweet transaction of like, hey, here's some money, thank you, we're gonna move in, everything's great. There was way more to it. There was a plan to it. There was let's expand, let's take over. So sure, that exact thing. If the Ottoman Empire wanted to say no or yes, that was up to their prerogative. But or the Palestinians at the time too, like, hey, yeah, you're a foreign Jew, that's fine, you know, whatever they wanted to do at the time. But beyond that, we can't just say like, oh, well, that initial transaction.
Well, no, I'm just trying to go one by one thing at a time.
Yeah.
So we agree that they were okay to buy land.
If that's what the local people told me to, yeah, sure.
Well, the owners, not the local people, the owners of the land.
Either one.
Yeah. So it was okay to buy land. So at what point do you think that Jewish people started engaging in unethical ways to acquire land?
Right away. So right away, there's a lot of evidence of them. Right away, that there was a lot of plans for them to expand immediately.
No, not plans. I'm asking behavior. Like, what behavior do they?
Immediately. So it was one only, obviously, like we said, we talked about this again, is basically buying out the land initially. Then it's kicking out any Arabs that work there, any Muslims or Jews, or any Muslims.
So far, all of this is
okay.
Specific. You're buying the land. You've got the rights to the land.
And kicking out people based on their religion's okay.
But kicking for any reason, you can kick them out. It's your land to own.
So, but that's what I'm saying. So you agree that if people buy land, they're allowed to kick out people based on their religion?
If you buy the land at that point in time, sure.
Not at that point, sure. Now, today, you're saying if I buy land, I should be able to.
Today, I don't think internationally. I don't think we accept.
Like, forget internationally. Don't jump out here. I'm asking you. If I buy a building, can I make it only available to Muslims?
When you say buy a building, there's a difference between owning property in somebody else's territory versus buying territory. I think if you buy territory, you've got a right to expel whoever you want, and then you can run your immigration policy however you want.
But okay, so this is the thing. I think you're thinking that they bought it as if like the Ottomans gave it to them and they said, feel free to set up an entire country in this land. It's your land. You rightfully own it. Right? It's not true.
No, I think that first of all, the people they bought it from, I don't even know if most of them even lived on this land. When you bought it, it gave you rights to do what you wanted with the land. If you buy that, that like you can buy the land. I think the rules. I think in the Ottoman Empire at the time, the rules were that if you kicked people off, you had to pay them whatever bullshit the fair share was for their land. Now that number was very low, but the Jews, when they bought it and they kicked people off, they gave them, I think it was what, like $18 a head or something, adjusted for inflation is like a really low amount. But they paid them for the land, they kicked them off, but they bought it, and under the Ottoman Empire's rules, that was their right to do with what they wanted. Just like if somebody comes and buys this apartment building, I'm just a renter here, they can kick me out.
But they cannot kick you out based on your religion.
Why are we focusing on the based on your religion part?
Because that is exactly what happened. You're acting as if they didn't. They just happened to kick out only Arabs or only Muslims and Christians. It was just a happy accident. That's your actual point.
I don't think it was a happy accident, but like we're like everybody living there is already like basically only Arab and basically all Muslims. So I mean like any kind of expulsion is going to be that basically.
But I'm asking you, is that right or wrong?
I think in that period of history, I think it was probably fine. I think it was okay.
This idea of like that period in history, but then that's the equivalent of being like, okay, America owned slaves. It was totally fine back then. So yeah, I agree with it. It wasn't wrong. That's a weird way to phrase it, to just say, yes, that is wrong. That clearly the reasons why it's wrong today is because it disrupts people's lives. It gets them angry and it gets justification for people fighting back.
I don't think. Do you think that we would apply or retrospectively analyze the moral decisions of nations using our current understanding and our articulation of international law? Would you analyze all of it the same way?
Yes, in the sense of like if that's affecting today as it is, yes.
Okay, I wouldn't. I don't think that's a. I just don't think that's a good way to analyze things. It doesn't make any sense. It makes people look exceptionally evil or exceptionally good based on standards that they didn't even believe in at the time. It doesn't make any sense.
But that's a really weird way to look at it. Of like where like, because I'm not trying to say like looking at these people and they're exceptionally evil. But the thing is people stay the same in the sense of like when you do that exact same thing actions today, you get the same.
It's a totally different. Today is totally different than the pre-Israel Yeshuv buying land, like foreign Jews buying land from the Ottoman Empire. I think it's a different thing.
So then, if it's normal, then why did the Arabs get mad about it? If it was just like a normal thing, like clearly they were like, dude, this is normal. Why are you upset? This was like a norm here.
I think that the main frustration or upsetness probably happened after the 20s when Britain was giving.
That's not true. There was problems in fighting before the 20s. So start with the early on fighting. Why were they fighting?
Well, I don't recall reading any of that. I don't know. Maybe there wasn't. But my understanding is most of the fighting happened in the 20s and afterwards, because what happened was British mandates were being formed and French mandates were being formed for surrounding territory. And after a decade of Jewish immigration, I think that the Arabs living in Palestine were like, hold on, these guys and these guys and those guys all got a country, but it kind of looks like there's a lot of Europeans coming in here. I don't know if we're going to get this country. I think that's where a lot of the frustration and anger started to set in, because they were like, holy shit, when this mandate expires from Britain, I don't know if we're going to have a country here. It doesn't seem like it because now all these European fucking Jews are coming in. I think that was where a lot of the frustration came from.
Okay, so you're under the impression that this the aggression and everything started at past 1920.
that the extreme frustration for Jewish people, I think is
Sure,
around
it
like the 20s.
it might have expanded. Obviously, I'm saying pre-1920. Do you think that there were conflicts between Arabs and Jewish people?
Pre-1920?
Yes.
There might have been like a little, but my understanding is most of it picked up
By the way,
that.
the historian's available now to hop in, but I don't want it to be like a 2v1. I can
No,
hop
that's
out.
fine. You can bring him
whatever
if you want. Whatever's right and correct. Yeah.
Yeah. Let me just let me text him the name. He's already. I think you already friended him on Discord. He said.
I might have removed him because I remove a lot of people because my friends list fills up.
Liam
I know.
O'Mara?
I don't think I have him anymore because we hadn't talked to so long. Yeah, I didn't remove him because I hate him. My friends list fills up, so I just
No. You're good. I did text him the thing, so maybe I'll send you a request. I don't know if I have him either. All right, perfect. Yeah, so there was a lot of confrontation pre-1920, and this is the thing though, and this is what we'll bring him on to talk about. He's Jewish as well, but something that we want to talk about is like those things matter, right? The pre-1920 matter because when you lead up to like, oh, the Arabs just attacked, or this happened, or this happened.
Hold on, wait, I'm sorry, hold on, I gotta stop. Hold on. I have never in my life, no, wait, just be clear. I've never said, oh, and then they randomly attacked. Nothing here is random. Everything here has causes that are contributing to everything. I just want to be clear.
Say, like, that's, I apologize. I'm not trying to put words in your mouth. But when you say like, oh, like, I'm 50-50 on it, but you don't know the context of what led up to it, that might be why you're 50-50
Wait, what context do you think I don't know?
So do you know what happened before pre-1920 between the Arabs and Jews? Can I ask you then? You tell me about it.
My understanding is that pre-1920, as Jews started to move in, pre-1917, I think there was the first Aliyah where I think they came in. I don't think they had much external financial support. I don't think there was much of an economy there. I think a lot of those people came in, some got sick, some left, and it was just kind of a shit show. I think the second Aliyah was a bit more established and that they had a bit more capital and they came in. I'm sure there was like minor conflict, but I don't remember like any big massacres or anything. There might have been that I just haven't read because my pre-40 history isn't the greatest. And then after the 20s, like from 1917 onwards, that's when you started to see, I think, the rise more like al-Husseini, the Mufti in Jerusalem started to come in, and you started to see a lot more Palestinian nationalism in response to all of the Jews starting to move in because now people are starting to get more irritated. The Yeshub forums, you've got like your local defensive fighting forces. You've got Jews that are starting to terraform the land and shit.
But pre-1920, let's focus on that. Tell me a little bit about it, because that matters to the context of post-1920. Because when you say
pre-1920, I don't know much in terms of. Yeah, I'm not sure. You can link me or tell me. Were there huge massacres or was there huge conflict pre-1920? I'm not aware of much. I know that Jews were buying land. I know like the Sursok purchase happened, which was the largest single acquisition of land, and I know that they bought off and they moved farmers out of there. I know they moved in a lot of Jewish people there to work the land, and they diverted water and did marshes and shit. But I don't know like in terms of conflict. You can tell me. Yeah, what was their big stuff for?
So and then that's what I want to bring him on to actually give exact things, because I don't want to ever misquote something. But yeah, so there was conflict. There was significant conflict, and that adds context.
Wait, when you say significant conflict, what kind of conflict?
Well, given the population, right? We're not talking about like...
No, but I'm asking, were there like massacres? Was it Jew to Arab? Was it Arab to Jew?
That's what I'm saying. So I'm saying given the population, it wasn't like 10,000 people attacking 10,000 or, 750 people killed in a massacre in comparison to its population. And
No, but I'm just asking, like, when just saying there was conflict doesn't tell me anything. So like, tell me some big events. So like, for instance, I think in 29, there was the Hebron massacre. In 36 to 39, there were the Arab riots. In 36, you had the Peel Commission. In 47, you had the start of the Palestinian-Jewish civil war. Like, what I'm asking for, like, events, like what big things were happening before like 1920? Is there like a massacre that I should know about?
Well, but that's what I'm. So there's a couple things I just want to bring them on to go over the specific ones. But it wasn't just like, because I think you look at it like, was there some big thing that happened versus these were small migration patterns that were happening at the time that were causing contention in those little areas, these tribes, right? So it wasn't necessarily like 3 tribes attacking another and there's freaking missiles going back and forth or a massacre. But there was contention significantly, especially a lot of the migration that had happened in Jerusalem of Jewish people starting to set up like chairs and stuff in front of the Wailing Wall, blocking the Palestinians and the Muslims and the Christians from operating, basically walking in the area. There were fights. A lot of this stuff happened pre-1920, where there was a lot of contention between the Arabs. Well, I keep saying Arabs, but there are Arab Jews.
When did Jewish people first start buying land, or when did they even get to Jerusalem?
1880-ish. But there was about 24,000.
In 1880, they were buying land in Jerusalem? Like they were able to move Jews into...
Oh, in Jerusalem specific, I don't know the exact date.
Well, because you were saying before the 20s they were fighting over the Wailing Wall. That would be so under the Ottoman Empire there were Jewish people who I'm pretty sure were at dhimmi status still for the Ottoman Empire had more rights than Arabs.
Yeah, that's when I talk about Jerusalem. I'm not talking about like land disputes there. That was just those were other disputes of like physically. That we can go over in detail, but that's not what I'm saying. But yeah, so those added context matter to like, hey, in 1920 there was this explosion because I think you said you used the words. Correct me if I'm wrong. Like there was this like I don't think you said hatred for Jewish people, but the contention for Jewish people rose significantly in 1920.
Kind of. I mean, I say this over and over and over again. Nobody seems to care. I personally don't think it was driven by hatred for Jewish people. I think it was for Europeans. That's my feeling about it. But there's a lot of obviously like religious and racial lines that cross this. But I think it was mainly because they were Europeans.
Yeah. No, you're right in the sense of given putting everything aside, there's obviously a difference between the Arab Jews that live there, the Mizrahim Jews that live there, versus European Jews that were coming in.
Well, sure. I mean, there was a difference, but once the violence started from the Arabs to the Jews, when they were upset that the European Jews were coming in, they also massacred native Jews as well. So when people say like, oh, the Jews lived there peacefully with the Arabs, kind of true. But for instance, that massacre for Hebron in 29, I think the issue was trying to call those Jews to come and move up with them. And they were like, no, we've lived here for like centuries. Like we're fine. It's absolutely A-okay. And then they got massacred by the Arabs living there because they were Jewish, not because they were Zionists and not because they were supporting the Yishuv or whatever. So, I mean, like there was a lot of violence from Arabs. That was part of the reasons why it was becoming unworkable. But
yeah, that's something we'll talk about right now. I want to bring him on. Sorry, he's already friended me on Discord. You looked it up. You don't have him?
No, I don't. But you can give me his name or have him add me, and I'll drag him into the call.
That's right. Yeah, I just texted him. Waiting. All right, I'm adding him in. In terms of so we can just talk about something while we're waiting for him to get on too, which is what do you think the solution is today?
It has to be some kind of two-state solution. Yeah, it has to be some kind of two-state solution.
The only thing that's really difficult about that is Palestine doesn't even have enough resources to operate on its own, frankly.
I think they could.
Well, and I mean, you're getting external help, or I guess with the development of technology.
I think if they develop, I think they could. I mean, Israel's kind of shit for resources. Like the country is just not very resource rich.
That's why they built heavy in tech. That's why they get billions and billions of dollars. I think I did a whole study on this. They got $400 billion so far from Europe, or from just UK and America alone, something like that. I have the whole Excel sheet. I built it out.
$400 billion, or for what? Over what period of time?
Since the inception, like for a long time. But yeah, they've gotten hundreds of billions of dollars from around the world, which I think you agree on, right? Like
I don't know if I agree on that. I don't think I would agree on that. I'm not sure what the total amount is.
You don't think they've gotten hundreds of billions of dollars?
Hundreds of billions? Isn't our military contribution, I think, $2 to $3 billion a year right now? And then the U.S. started to become a major backer of Israel in '66, I think, at least in terms of like selling them weapons.
Yes, that's true. Yeah.
But I when you say given, do you mean just like sent for free, or are you talking about like trade?
So let's see. Israel has received the largest communication recipient of U.S. foreign aid since its founding of just from the U.S. of $300 billion, just from the U.S. Council of Foreign Relations.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, if you say so, sure.
Yeah. So $300 billion. So this idea of like they developed on just obviously that's just
hold on, wait. To be clear, the vast majority of this, over $200 billion, is military aid. So I know that we contribute to their military stuff. But that's not economic development. Right?
But then that military money actually goes into their development of technology, which then they sell back to us.
Sure, it might, yeah. But I mean, also, if you go down this list, we've given over $150 billion to Egypt. We've given over $150 billion to Afghanistan. We've given almost $150 billion to South Vietnam. We've given almost $100 billion to Iraq.
Double the amount to a country that's significantly smaller than Egypt. And that's just
we have. But I mean, like Israel also was really keen and eager to work with us and fashion themselves more as like a Western aligned nation than I guess part of the Middle East. So it makes sense that we work with them more, and they wanted to work with us more. Yeah.
And then by the way, that's just from that's the thing is that neither of these nations, frankly, can survive very much with the territory that they both have, not given external aid from these countries. That's the only reason why too, like Israel's really heavy into tech right now, is because that's one of the only ways that they would be able to sustain themselves without huge foreign aid.
Wait, they don't need. What's wrong with developing in tech?
No, nothing's wrong with it. I'm just saying.
I think Israel can survive economically without foreign aid. I don't think they need foreign aid to exist.
Are you saying right now, starting today, or since the inception? Because since the inception, I would bet anything that they would not exist, or they would not be able to exist without foreign aid.
Well, I mean, like,
ready if
in
I
terms
were
of they
you.
probably would have been destroyed by their neighbors, yeah. So militarily, they need to support. But foreign economic aid,
What resources do they have to export for the last, since 648?
well, I mean, they did a fuck ton of work terraforming the land to make it at least have some agricultural products. I think they did invest heavily into tech. I haven't done a lot of economic studies from Israel from the 40s and onwards, but it's not like they were just floating on foreign aid.
Let me just call them too. See. Yeah, no, I mean they were significant on foreign aid.
At what point?
Since inception.
In the back.
Since like 67. I mean, like since. Well, there's another reason to it in a second.
Watch your step.
Because one of the other things too is, as those people were fleeing post 1948, the Europeans were bringing, like a lot of the ones who weren't coming directly from World War II affects was bringing in a lot of money, right? These were Europeans that had money coming into a poor region and had a lot of money.
Well, you mean you're just talking about Jewish people coming in?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the Jewish people that came in, but there were also a fuck ton of Jewish people that came in with nothing, right? Because after every single big war, when the Jewish people fled the Arab countries they were living in, they didn't take any of their shit. They weren't allowed to keep their property. They were never compensated for any of that, and they showed up with literally nothing.
Easy now. This stuff is
So,
explosive.
I mean, like, there's a lot of people that live in poor as well.
And we're off.
Yeah, but then they had, like, Israel has one of the most robust foreign aid in the world. It's literally, like, I think it's the first thing I said. Israel's been the, oh, here we go, he just sent it. It's...
You got it.
I think that's it. I just sent that to you.
First blood, and a point well taken.
That was a close one.
You point, I'll punch.
Yep, center 25.
That away.
Give me 1 sec. I'm gonna go use the restroom. Okay, hold on.
There you go.
I heard you.
This will clean up your armor. You drive for a while. It's heat.
Is it mine? Sorry. My overexposure, because I literally haven't streamed or done anything in a long time.
You heard him.
This guy's getting his own foreign aid mid debate. No, I just like to be very factual.
Tiptoe
Okay, so
now.
he has a problem with
You're shaking my brew.
issues with starting Discord sessions. It says, does anyone know how to fix that? Issues with starting Discord sessions.
Okay.
It's like bringing historians. I like when people say like, "Oh, you're gonna bring a historian." Yes, I like to actually have citations for everything they say. Liam O'Mara, PhD, specifically focuses on Israel-Palestine conflict. Jewish guy.
Yeah.
Yeah. But he can introduce himself. The cameras keep zooming. Oh.
Please, ow.
Pull up the controller for it. Okay.
Yes.
Should stop now. This overexposure is insane. There we go.
Come on, boss.
Autofocus. Yeah, it's bad. No, it's not autofocus. It's face tracking. By the way, I literally like woke up this morning because I had DM'd Destiny a couple days ago, and then he just DM'd me this morning when I woke up and it was like, hop on.
Okay, I sent a friend request to that account, and I'm waiting for them to accept.
Got it. He just said, he just said he was having issues with it, but he said he has so he's just downloading on his phone then right now. You can do whatever you need to if you want to mute me for a bit. I'm gonna go to the bathroom. I'll give me a couple minutes. There's a problem. Skip that, but I appreciate you having me. But I'll be right back.
Whatever you say.
Please react to the update on Daisy Chan. Didn't she say she was having an abortion?
I'm going.
Total aid from 46 to 23 by fiscal
Let's
year.
go.
And constant $20. I wish I could see like a roadmap of this aid. Like I bet a fuck ton was.
Go, go, go!
73. At least for the military stuff. Maybe for the economic stuff too. Oh, fuck no.
Always do your dirty work.
74. I wonder what happened in 70. Oh, 79 was probably.
Your middle
wasn't-
tower is under
it was because of the
siege.
Egyptian scale.
Hey, you watch your head! Compound interest. Sounds like a plan.
Stop kicking me.
I'll make a tincture.
All right already.
Look, Cluck's cooking.
Not
What the? We're under attack! Mixing it up. Everything good comes from a bottle. Yep. Yes. Cocktail now.
Did he accept my friend request or does he see it?
He says, I don't know what's wrong with it on the phone. It shows no friend request.
Are you sure the name you gave me was correct? I see his full name on my thing popping up. You could try to have him add me if you want.
That's what I just said. I literally just told him, I was like, add me or him. There's no other platform to add him on, huh? Yeah, let me, that's what I just sent out. That's what the right, yeah. So are you? I didn't even realize that
You're
we were
making me
kidnapped, too.
spill.
Yeah, I didn't know that. I literally clicked like because it says this content is blocked. Why does it say this content is blocked on your website?
Complicated.
Stir it up.
But you can't. You have to watch kick.com/destiny.
Got it. Okay, makes sense. Okay, fix that. Found both of your requests. Oh yeah, there we go.
Come on, boss. I'm going.
I
I'm
think
going.
this must be in billions of dollars, guys. Right?
Bottles make everything better.
All right already.
Cocktail time. Run, buddy, run.
I did. Oh wait, make it public.
Yeah, that's it.
What?
Stop kicking me.
Cocktails in 5. We're under attack. Got you.
Hello, hello.
There we go, Liam.
Hello.
Hey, what's up?
Not much. Just grading papers. Or was anyway.
Yeah. Well, Liam, you want to? Oh, I guess you can talk about. I was gonna say, Liam, if you want to introduce yourself.
Well, I mean, is this like streaming somewhere or?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, okay, because I was gonna say we all three of us have met at different points.
Punches.
Liam O'Mara, I'm a professor of history. I'm technically a historian of ideas and cultures, but my main areas are the Middle East and Europe, and I work a lot on Israel, Palestine, things like that.
Decanting.
Cool. And then also, I interviewed you a long time ago when you were running for. I think you were running for Congress, right?
I was indeed, yeah. My short career as an anti-politician.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. All right. So.
Let's
okay.
go.
Where do we start?
Well, we can talk. I mean, the best thing is to start off where we were talking, which is, kind of early, because Destiny doesn't know too much about this. I was a little foggy on the dates, so I didn't want to give any misinformation to be accurate, which is kind of pre-1920, what did that migration look like from Jewish people into Palestine? Kind of to give an overall of Destiny's point, I think Liam's watching me your stream too, so he might have points he wants to touch on too, which is, Destiny's point is like, hey, they legally bought the land in these areas, and correct me if I'm wrong, but they bought the land, and then from there, they had all right because the Palestinians technically never owned the land because the Ottomans did, and then Britain did, so then they had the right to kind of take it. So is that quick? I know there's a lot to it, but does that quickly kind of touch on things, Destiny?
I would say that arguing that land purchases that happened under the Ottoman Empire are like super immoral or should have never happened, I think that's a really foggy claim to make. My understanding is most of the land that Jews bought was bought under the Ottoman Empire, and that most of the purchases were done then. That's like a discrete claim about that. I don't know if I would argue that justifies anything before or after, but that's like the discrete claim I would make from that area, yeah.
So on land purchases, which are only legal after the reforms in the end of the 1850s, but then suddenly you can purchase land. They did later try to prevent, non-citizens from purchasing land, and then people proceeded to keep doing so illegally. Most of the land ends up in the hands of a handful of Byzantine landowners, though. There's a handful of Palestinian landowners who do pretty well, and a whole lot of people way outside of Palestine that snap up all the land because most people didn't understand the shift from usufruct rights to private property rights. So, they just like, well, governments have only ever drafted me and taxed me, so this is a scam. So people didn't get it. So most of the land in Palestine ended up, essentially in the hands of people far outside the empire. And then people went to them and purchased the land from people in Istanbul. But I'm not sure where you're going with land purchases anyway. By the time you get to 1948, they still had only purchased 6% of the land. So it's not a huge number either way.
Yeah, sure. I don't know why I don't know what part of this is or what.
No. I just want to talk a little bit about that, and then so kind of leading into it, Destiny's point of view is like he's 50-50 on like justification.
Oh wait, just give us like a time period we can talk about it. I can explain my point. Just like what time period do you want to talk about it? Yeah. Then I can give.
We can talk about. You want to talk about the 40? This is something we had talked about, which is I was talking about this, Liam, which is kind of the invasion in 48 and all the countries kind of coming in, and the idea that like all these countries started to attack Israel. And I was kind of touching on the fact that a lot of these villages stayed in place. A lot of the Arabs stayed in Israel because of the neighboring states of Jordan, Lebanon, and then Egypt kind of going in and defending those small villages. How involved were the other countries in 48? Were they sending in all their military? Destiny kind of touched on that they went up to almost Tel Aviv or close to Tel Aviv, things like that.
Well, to start with, the invasions only happened 6 months into the process of Nakba, which began in the end of the previous year. I mean, it was already well in play by the beginning of November.
Why did the Nakba start?
Because the Zionist movement was not willing to accept the partition along the borders proposed and wanted to take more of the land.
Well, my understanding is that is completely not true.
Okay, back up for a second. As of an internal coup inside the Zionist movement, led by people like Ben Gurion, you can look up the Biltmore meeting in 42. They aimed for 100% Palestine.
That's fine, but 42 is not 47. It's not relevant to this particular conversation. I don't think there was a coup inside the party. There was huge disagreements within the Zionist leadership in terms of accepting that.
Chronology matters. So a statement before that is continued all the way through. So back up for a second. 42, 100%. Repeat it again in 46 in Paris. Again, 100% if possible. 90% if not. In the couple of years before the Nakba, they started collecting information called the Village Files, documenting where everyone was and what they could do, and then set out to reject, partition, and conquer lands far outside. So they consciously moved into the northern Galil and up into the hill country, which were not granted to them under the UN partition plan.
Well, nothing was
because there
granted
was
to
no
them
intention of taking
under
it
the
seriously.
nothing was granted
So
to them
then-
because nobody accepted it, right?
Well, it never went into effect. They never did anything. The UN participant is irrelevant.
Well, yeah,
But
because
it was
the Arabs would never
proposed-
accept it. They flat out rejected out of hand anything that
The
would have.
Zionist movement would never have rejected it at all, so it doesn't matter.
What do you mean?
It's really irrelevant.
Wait, how is the 47 partition plan irrelevant when the Jewish side accepted it, but the Arab side rejected it out of hand?
Because the Jewish side did not. And we have all of their internal documents, all of their correspondence, all the journal entries, all the cabinet meetings, every one of them saying, we will take all of this. There's a mountain of statements made by them that they will take all of it, so there's no acceptance of a partition at all. Then
Do we understand that? Wait.
Okay. Well, I was saying, by the time you get to the Arab armies, that's 6 months into the process, and 200,000 people have already been pushed over the borders. 200,000 people have been expelled from Palestine before any Arab armies got involved.
What happened right before the expulsions?
Here we go.
Did the Jewish people just randomly start expelling people because they wanted to, or what happened? What were the lead-ups? What were the events that happened right before anybody started to flee?
Somewhere around a decade worth of terrorist attacks.
On it.
I mean, groups like Haganah and Irgun attacking people, and
When you're doing your historical analysis for this region, do you trust any Israeli historians, as like Alan Pape,
I get most of my material comes from Israeli historians.
Okay,
But as
so
well as
Israeli
Palestinian
historians
and
would
non-Israelis, like Europeans, Americans, anywhere, because history is an international discipline that
Your
follows
top
the same
tower
basic
is under
methods. So
siege.
where you come from matters not one bit.
Well, that's absolutely not true because different people account for history in different ways, right? So, for instance, in this particular region, some people.
Different individuals interpret things, but history is an international discipline, and it all matters. So anything produced by a particular historian in a particular country gets submitted into the same basic pool, and we all choose to use it or not based upon whether or not it makes sense, whether or not it with the archival data, whether it was decent interpretations. Good stuff rises to the top, shitty stuff does not.
Sure, but there are still major contentions around historical events that different historians that are, very valid and very accredited can disagree with each other. So, if you want to say this one,
Can you cite some that you're talking about?
well, even if like the new Israeli historians, right? So you've got people like Alan Pape are going to have massive disagreements with Benny Morris. People like Avi Schleim that might even be considered somewhat like center right leaning are going to have disagreements with people on both sides. Like these people are considered super reputable historians when it comes to Israeli history.
Sure, but all three of them actually acknowledge the basic elements of Nakba.
The only reason I'm asking about what led up to the Nakba. Yeah, I'm asking what led up to the Nakba because it wasn't just randomly Jewish people expelling a ton of Arabs. It was in response to a massive amount of Arab protest and violence after the rejection of the partition plan. That's when the major military conflict there started.
I mean, it's not, but okay.
Okay, I'll go read more, look this up. So I just want to be very, very clear. So you're telling me that after the rejection of the partition plan, you don't believe that massive military violence started against the Jewish people that lived in Israel? You don't think that happened?
I know that things like that happen because people have been fighting consistently for a decade by that point.
When you
Go
say
back to
that,
the
why
1930s
do you,
Arab- That never calmed down.
It did. It was put down very violently by 39. It was like a lot of that had
The
been put
only
down.
reason there was relatively few Palestinian attacks on Zionists, and there were very few beforehand, is because they had been largely disarmed by the time you get to the end of 39. But tensions remained.
Okay, so I'm just going to ask again. So after the rejection of the 47 partition plan, did that moment instigate a bunch of Arab against Jew violence in Israel? Do you think that happened, or do you think that didn't happen, or?
Everything better.
I'm saying it didn't instigate.
You heard him.
Okay.
That
So then there
violence
wasn't
was
a huge
already
surge.
started before.
No,
I mean,
that's
it picked different arbitrary dates to start the conflict as if it magically appeared.
no one is
Of course
talking about it.
didn't.
I'm just it's very strange that you would pretend that the same level of violence existed from 1920 to 1948 in Israel. Do you think that that's the case? Can you clarify that? Do you think that the same level of violence
I
existed?
didn't. I did not say that either. It's a bizarre interpretation of what I just said.
Well, but because every time I ask you about 47, you say no. But okay, so when
there was persistent violence from the beginning of the 1880s all the way through.
But that was the point. Destiny earlier did. So Destiny earlier, when we were talking about this, was basically discussing that he doesn't know of. I don't say didn't believe, but doesn't know if there was that much violence pre-1920. So from what I got from it, so my interpretation of it, it was like not much happened, and it was kind of 1920 was when everything started happening, all that violence.
Prior to the 1920s, the Zionist population was tiny. There were 25,000 Zionists in the entire country. That's nothing.
Were there any violence or conflict between the Muslims, Christians, and Jewish people at the time, or was there no violence pre-1920?
There was violence between Zionists and Palestinians before 1920, but it was obviously on a smaller scale because the population as a whole was tiny. The population only began growing rapidly in the 1920s. Before that, most Zionists who moved there actually ended up leaving. In the first 2 waves of migration, most of the people who came in both of those waves ended up leaving because it was very difficult to make a living on the land. The climate was very different. A lot of their techniques didn't work. People didn't really want them there anyway, so it was quite a difficult place to move into. So a lot of people, if I get a ticket to Buenos Aires, the population only starts increasing rapidly under the British mandate.
And so
at that point, the scale of violence goes up.
Yeah, and so Destiny, for your point, what it seems like you're trying to say is like...
Wait, hold on. Can you admit... Wait. Can you recognize that you were completely wrong about violence in the 1920s? Or at least he seems to take my position.
No, there was violence.
But not much. The main reactions were when...
I word for word said, which he ironically said, I said it was in comparison, the population was literally 24,000. I said those exact numbers too. And that in comparison, you're not going to see a massacre of 70,000 people because there was literally small group bouts of violence all around the area, which is exactly what he just said. So it's not wrong. You just got caught literally having another person confirm exactly what I said, where you admitted, oh, I don't know anything pre-1920. But if you want to dive into it, educate us. What happened pre-1920?
I'm not trying to educate you. I'm just saying that I was asking you because my impression was the pre-20s, Jewish people living there wasn't that big of a deal because the population hadn't started to explode under the mandate. And you said, no, it grew by 400%. And I said,
did from 1880 to 19.
Yeah, but then I was asking you, okay, well, I'm curious, are there like specific massacres or something that I should be?
But that's what I'm saying. You see how you jumped immediately to go like, oh, was there a massacre? Like instead of going where there actual violence, was there conflict? You jumped to an extreme, to a straw man argument of like, okay, show me a massacre.
Why do you think a massacre is extreme? I think massacres are like generally good figures to figure out like the type of violence that's going on. There's a lot of violence.
Obviously, if there was one, it's easier to check. But do you think there are things in between no violence and massacres? Do you think there are things that could happen?
Yeah, of course there are. But I think that when violence starts to happen a ton, you start to see massacres start to pop up.
There are decades worth of shootings and stabbings and whatnot before you get to the first serious attacks like massacres or bombings or anything else. All that kind of stuff builds toward it. It builds steadily over many, many decades.
And this is the main issue, Destiny, which is what I was discussing, which is it's not because, and we both do this, where it's like, oh, did they just attack for no reason? No. What built it up?
I've never said that, to be clear. I've never said that anybody attacked for no reason. I've never said it in my life, but yeah.
Literally 30 seconds ago when he was talking about it, you said, what, did the Jewish people just randomly start attacking? That's what you said. So what I'm saying is we both
No, I'm asking because the presentation. No, wait, hold on. The presentation of the Nakba is just very interesting that he just says that Jews just started expelling a ton of Arabs. And I'm asking about specific violent events, and then he hand waves it and says, well, there was a decade of violence. That's not true. There were specific events that happened after the rejection of the partition plan. Yeah.
Can we calm down, take a step back here?
Mm-hmm.
I want to talk about what actually led to this, because the reasons for the Nakba have essentially nothing to do with any of the violence that we're talking about. It's not about attacks. They're not responses to attacks. No point is it a response to attack. What it is it's based upon what they wanted, and you can see this from from fairly early stuff. I mean, especially by the time you get to Herzl. Not one of the earliest scientists, but by the time you get to Herzl, they're already talking about driving people out. The goal is to create a state for Jews without Palestinians on it. You're already saying that in the 1890s, and it's repeated over and over and over again for decades. There's very contentious discussions inside the Zionist movement. There's a relatively small faction that's for binationalism and wants, to work with the Palestinians, keep them there. Of course, there's also the communists who don't really care about this stuff. But a large share of the Zionist movement from the start is determined to drive out Palestinians because they want a democracy, but they want it to be a Jewish ethno-state. If it's a democracy that has Palestinians, then it's not a Jewish state. And they were determined to create a 19th century style nation state, which means no Palestinians. There's huge amounts of data, tons of articles, essays, letters, discussions by the Zionists themselves, books, whole pamphlets written by the Zionists describing ethnic cleansing, transfer. It is a fundamental core feature of Zionist ideology that is present from the start. And the arguments were getting more contentious in the 20s and 30s, largely because of the binational factor and the communist factors pushing back against that. But by the time you get to the beginning of the 1940s, they are effectively sidelined in an internal coup, and from that point on, it's all about expulsion.
Why did the conversation become so much more contentious in the 20s and 30s?
Inside Zionism?
Yeah.
Largely because of outside pressure, different forces on there. There were a lot of people, in fact, the situation in places like the Americas actually very much opposed the idea of an ethno-state.
So you don't think that the massive amount of Arab to Jewish violence, you don't think that was influential at all at people beginning to feel more and more like transfer was inevitable? For that famous quote.
Well, the transfer position predated any of that. So
talks of transfer did, but in 47, when it came time to actually put pen to paper, Jewish people accepted a state that would have had 45% of the population as Arabs.
And yet they didn't accept that at any point.
They did. They literally Israel accepted, or the Yishuv accepted the 47 partition plan.
They did not. They lied in public.
You're saying they accepted it, but they would have not adhered to it?
I'm saying they said in public they would do it, and in their own internal discussions, again, cabinet minutes exist, journal entries exist, letters exist, all the documents around what they did exist. This is a long-term pattern.
Okay, wait. I just want to ask very specifically. You're telling me that I can find documents with internal Zionist leaders saying, we're going to accept the partition plan and then expel them afterwards anyways. You're telling me I can find those documents? No, I'm telling you can find documents that say that the partition idea is a joke and they're going to conquer all of it. Okay, but that's not relevant. That doesn't matter. What political leaders say in the 20s and 30s. During 1948, Ben-Gurion was saying in public, this is going to be a new Holocaust, they're going to drive us out. Because the Arabs were saying that. The Arabs were making those statements, yes. In the cabinet meetings that he was leading, he was saying, ignore them completely, they're not a threat to us, focus on expelling people. We have those minutes. They never took the Arab army seriously at all, nor could they have, because Haganah alone outnumbered all of the Arab armies. And most of those forces actually didn't bother to engage. Some of them because they'd been neutered to begin with. Jordan chose not to engage because they'd already cut a deal to take territory. Iraq focused on the eastern Galilee. Lebanon focused mostly on the places right along the border with Lebanon, and then retreated into Lebanon when the Zionists invaded Lebanon. And the Egyptians got their asses handed to them. The Egyptians literally conquered parts of the territory. They got the Gaza Strip. They pushed 15 to 20 miles to Tel Aviv. Yeah, they all lost because the surrounding armies were really bad at conducting warfare. They were bad at conducting warfare, so they ended up losing their things. But also, when you say cut a deal for territory, Jordan also took over the West Bank. That wasn't their territory to own. That was territory that they conquered. Yes, exactly. That was a deal they cut with the Zionists beforehand to take territory, which is why the most professional military available to them actually didn't engage in any of the real combat. They stayed out of the fight for the most part. They weren't relevant to it. But again, the only reason the Strip ended up under Egyptian control, it was never part of Egypt. It was never annexed or held. The only reason it was under their control was that by the end of 48, Ben-Gurion was worrying that the Zionists were going to lose international opinion because there were tons of
newspaper articles. The New York Times was running articles about massacres. I mean, the international media was reporting quite honestly what was happening, and they were worried that this was going to create a backlash that would undermine the support they got because of the Shoah, and that they would lose the state in the way that they wanted
yes,
it.
I know. This is why I'm saying statements quoted from leaders in the 20s and 30s aren't relevant to the political realities that they have to confront in the 40s. So if I'm looking at Israel accepting a petition in 47, I'm not going to look and see what Theodore Herzl, who died 40 years earlier, stated in his diaries. I'm not going to look at what Ben-Gurion thought in the early 30s or what early Yeshuvi leaders thought in the 20s. I'm going to see what were the political realities of the ground and what was Israel willing to accept. And Israel pre-Israel accepted the 47 partition plan, and I don't believe. Hold on, I asked earlier if there were. Hold on, let me finish, please. I asked you earlier if there were documents showing that the pre-Israeli or post-Israeli leaders had said, we are going to accept the partition plan and then kick them out anyway. And you gave me a bunch of random stuff from pre-statements in the 20s and 30s. I don't believe any of those documents.
You said in 46.
Yes, I understand. Yes, I understand 46. Hold on, I understand 46.
But are you going to play the game of 46 is not 47?
It is. So that's correct. Time moves in one direction. Yes, time moves in one direction.
Destiny, you're moving the goalposts of, hey, he said that 3 hours ago, but things change, man. You don't know. That was
because things too change. I'm just asking. I'm asking for even in 46. Even in 46.
Even a couple hours ago, so things can change. You don't know his intention. Is one of the most
1947. It's the same fucking year.
In 47, I can when
you went. They lied, and we know they lied because they said they lied.
Okay, what can I read? What can I read to find that? What can I read? Show me.
Exactly the same thing as 37 too.
No, we're not. No, why are we jumping? Don't jump! We're staying on 47. Hold on 47. Where?
When you see the same thing in 37 and in 47, that they accept in public and lied to do it because and that their own documents say that they lied in both cases.
And I'm asking, where can I find information? What documents am I reading to show that in 47 the council was talking about accepting something from the UN but lying about it, but not actually adhering to it? We're gonna kick them out. We're gonna expel Arabs anyway. I'm not aware of these conversations.
Yeshuv's cabinet meetings, Ben-Gurion's journal, and letters exchanged between him and Chaim Weizmann.
So if you find that information, Destiny, in 47, would you then concede to this?
I would say that they said that they were going to lie, yeah, but I'm just curious what documents I'm supposed to be reading.
It's honestly nothing to concede because it's a standard part of all of the histories. I have multiple shelves that are all going to reference these events. They all say the same thing. Because this has been established history for decades.
On the Arab side, this is established history. On the Arab side, this is established history. But on the Western historian side,
on the American side, on the British side, on the French side, on the German side, and everyone who does fucking history.
I don't think that's the case, which is why you can't point me to a document or
a statement.
I don't
care what
I know you. Well, you should care. You're arguing with me about it. I'm just curious what the statement or document.
I came here because Dominic suggested. I'm a historian. This is an area of expertise.
If it's an area of I'm sorry, hold on. If you're going to present yourself as a historian in this as an area of expertise, then I need you to tell me specifically what I need to be looking up. Like what council minute meetings, what statements by who, in regards to what. Like you should be able to point me to something more than what I have to find in a Google search.
Destiny, he word for word told you Ben-Gurion's journal is one of them.
Ben-Gurion has lots of journals. This guy was the prime minister leader of Israel for like fucking 100 years. Like what do you mean? That's not a real statement.
I'm supposed to give you like the ID number in the archives for different documents. That's what you want. That's the kind of stuff that I'm supposed to find.
No. I'm sorry. Hold on. You've got a lot of books on your bookshelf behind you. Point me to a book. Tell me which book you've read where you found this, and I can look it up on my Kindle right now. I can Control F. We can go through Morris's Righteous Victims. We can go through anything by Schleim or even Pape or any of these other Rashid Khalid, whatever historian you want to cite. Just give me a book and I'll look it up.
Just mute you for a while, and I'll go over here and I'll start flipping through indices, and I'll find sections in books that'll make you happy. Is that what I'm here for, Dominic?
Hold on. Wait. Hold on. No.
Name a book for him, and then we'll go from there. Name one of the books.
Hold on. I'm sorry. Hold on.
What he's asking for specifically is mentioned.
You said that you were a historian with a specialty in the area, so I want an answer that I could get that I wouldn't get from a YouTuber, which is, it's in the minutes somewhere. That doesn't sound like a specialized, historically researched answer. That just sounds like something I would hear in a video essay. That's why I'm asking.
Yes.
But you're like saying like what page is it on with this?
I'm not asking about pages. I'm just saying that like what's like a book that's written about this. You don't have to give me the fucking chapter. You just tell me like who's an author and what's a book they've written about this particular thing that I can look up because I've read passages in books. I've read chapters in these books where they talk about this, and I don't remember those minutes. But then maybe they exist. I just haven't seen them. That's all I'm asking for.
Look,
Got it.
Look,
so which book?
can you hold on just a second. Like, once you have read, several hundred books on the same subject area, which one covers the specific question you're asking gets to be a little hard to keep track of. I have an entire bookcase on modern Palestinian history. So I don't have which book you're asking. Give me a book and I can look right now on my Kindle. I can't help you. Give me a second. I can look. I can give you very specific references, or you can keep screen. Whatever makes one.
I would just like a single citation of source. That's it.
Take your time and grab the book, or one of the books, any of them that reference. Destiny, which books have you read on that specific?
The only full book I've read is the Scars of War, Wounds and Peace by the Shlomo Ben Ami. And then I've done like tons of passages, mainly out of Benny Morse books, and then other new historians, essentially the 4 new historian people from Israel. And then I've done some contemporary, like some Finkelstein stuff for research. But for modern stuff, most of what I've read is going to be like declassified papers. There was a lot of that between Reagan and Carter. That was released about Egypt piece. It's going to be like a lot of UN reports. It's going to be a lot of things like the Gold Star report or Amnesty International reports or like NGO papers.
More modern.
Or it's going to be ICJ stuff or like that 2004 advisory opinion gets brought up a lot. Like most of it is going to be like papers and stuff like that.
Come on, boss.
You heard him.
Watch your heels.
Easy now. This stuff is coming.
You guys not going to talk about anything else?
You gotta come straight to mine.
Wait for me.
But yeah, so this is something that matters, which is like why having this information, reading those minutes from the cabinet meetings, reading Fingernail's journal with the journals that reference these things are really important to understand. But that's why, to me, earlier, when you keep doing the idea of like, well, that was last year, that was last week, or that was 10 years ago, we can't use that. That argument can just always be inflated. And
No, hold on. I'm going to explain this one time. I don't even know if you're following on this. The reason why I'm bringing this up is because for Israel, political realities would force them to do things that they didn't always want to do. That's why when I ask, well, what did Israel do in 49? What did they have the appetite for in 56 or in 67? When wait, no, stop! Please let me finish. When I'm asking these questions, okay, the reason why is because a statement a leader made early on might become very quickly irrelevant if the population feelings change, if external conditions change, if other facts or situations on the ground change. Then what leaders can do, they have a window of maneuverability. Even if they've got a desire over here, they might not be able to act on it. So I wouldn't take them saying something and they feel like, oh, well, this is what they said, therefore they're going to do this and this, and they must have lied about this, because Israeli leaders have been forced to do things that they don't always like to do.
I mean, that makes sense if they had taken the opposite position. If they're taking the position early on, they want 100% of Palestine, and then they aim for 100% of Palestine, nothing actually changed because of the realities of conflict. Nothing changed.
I understand what you're saying, but the issue... I understand what you're saying. I've never denied...
But there's no evidence to support your conclusion whatsoever at all.
You don't even know what my I don't think you even know what my conclusion is. I'm not saying that Israel doesn't want all of Palestine. That would be ridiculous. Obviously they do. Today they do. And in 48 and before then, they probably did. But what I'm saying is that if they had been confronted with a more diplomatically sophisticated enemy, instead of one that just wanted to fight all the time, then I don't think they would have been able to carry out as much of
a hypothetical. That's just the equivalent of being like, yeah, well, if
I'm not giving just a hypothetical. I'm going to cite the things.
Even there, why would it? Even there, why honestly would it make sense for a sophisticated Palestinian leadership to surrender half of their country to a population that owns 6% of the land and makes up a tiny fraction of the population?
Because the Jewish people there might have owned
unitary democracy, which is what Palestinians were after in the first place, was a unitary democracy free of British colonialism.
I seriously doubt that. They wanted the first democracy in the area of any other Arab state. They were going to be the first ones.
That actually isn't accurate as a statement anyway.
What were the other surrounding democracies? Hold on, wait. Who were the surrounding Arab democracies around Israel at the time? Or
there had been. Well, okay, so in the period immediately just before, Lebanon and Syria were both still democratic.
Hold on, I'm sorry. Syria was literally getting couped and changing governments like every year at that point. You're telling me that
in 1949, the first coup was in 49.
Yeah, and then prior to that, it was a British mandated thing.
No, it was a French territory up to World War
French
II.
mandated thing. Yes.
In 1943, they were independent.
And you're
democratic until 49. The democracy wasn't effective.
Okay, I'll put aside the Syrian thing, okay, and ignore all the monarchs and the secular dictatorships and everything else that existed around there. I don't think that Palestinians had the appetite. I don't know if there's any evidence that. I'd be curious to see that, if there's any statements of any Palestinian leaders that al-Husseini was interested in setting up like a democracy for the Palestinians there. I have never heard that, but maybe there is. I'd be curious to see it. But I still want to see that statement about the 47 partition plan thing. I'm still waiting for that.
Yeah, well, let's see. There's and
Liam, he doesn't even ask him for the page. It's just the book. He can buy it on Kindle.
Well, again, in any one of these, he's trying to ask a very specific question. He's gonna be able to like nitpick on any of these things, but this biography of Ben Gurion covers the discussion around partition pretty well. Zionist he is. Morris is just covers the discussions around this pretty well. Pape discusses this in at least a couple of different places. I'm pretty sure he discusses it in Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine, and I think he does also again in Biggest Prison on Earth.
I think he does have that one
in the Iron Wall discusses the fact that they were dishonest about these things in 37 and 47. So Shlaim is another source there. There's tons of places, but no, if you want me to find like references that would point you to the specific cabinet minutes or journal entries, I'd have to look for a bit. But the discussions around partition and the fact that they were never going to take seriously any kind of partition from the outside, I mean, that's in everything over and over again. That's in like the basic textbooks that you can assign at a undergrad level. It's not debatable that the Zionists have no intention whatsoever of accepting partition. And saying that it's because Palestinians wouldn't accept me stealing half their country, so I had to take all of it, that's just dishonest. There was an option inside the Zionist movement calling for a binational democracy that would have respected both people's rights, that would have respected Palestinian identity and Jewish identity on the land as equals. That's the side that was voted down in 42. And from that point on, it's just straight through. And all along, ever since then, it's been the same thing.
Okay.
They've never changed it.
I'm gonna motor mouth for a second, okay? On November 28th, so I believe one of the books you held up was Righteous Victims, which I've read a decent chunk of, but not all of it. So on November 28th, in the hours before the crucial... What, was it not Righteous Victims? What was the second one you held up?
No. 1948.
Oh, it was 1948, sorry. Okay, well, this comes from Righteous Victims, so it doesn't matter. On November 28th, in the hours before the crucial vote, the Arabs succeeded in obtaining a short delay, but only a serious compromise proposal could have warded off the vote petition, and this the Arabs could have made together. AHC representatives made themselves scarce during the Palestinian deliberations as the Pakistani delegate, Zufrullah Khan, the ablest of the Muslim spokesmen. Voting was broadcast live on radio around the world. Nowhere was attention more riveted than in Palestine. The tally was complete. 33 states had voted yes, 14 no, some abstained. Partition had passed, but not very comfortably. The nays had consisted of the Arab and Muslim states, Cuba and India. The A's of the United States, the British Commonwealth, or the I's, I'm sorry, of the United States, the British Commonwealth states, Western Europe, the Soviet bloc, and most of Latin America. Among the abstainers have been Britain, Argentina, Mexico, Chile, and China. The Zionists and their supporters rejoiced. The Arabs walked out of the hall after declaring the resolution invalid. They could not fathom, a Palestinian historian would later write, why 37% of the population had been given 55% of the land, of which they only owned 7%. And the Palestinians failed to see why they should be made to pay for the Holocaust. They failed to see why it was not fair for the Jews to be a minority in a unitary Palestinian state, while it was fair for almost half of the Palestinian population, the indigenous majority on its own ancestral soil, to be converted overnight into a minority under alien rule. The Arab delegates asserted that any effort to implement the resolution would lead to war. Ben-Gurion knew that there would be a war, but still he said, I know of no greater achievement by the Jewish people in its long history since it became a people. Resolution 181, almost done. Resolution 181 was, in some way, Western civilization's gesture of repentance for the Holocaust, the repayment of a debt owed by those nations that realized that they might have done more to prevent or at least limit the scale of Jewish tragedy during World War II. The Zionists had effectively exploited the unusual situation in which, for a brief moment, there was Soviet-American agreement on the Palestinian problem. Helped to a great extent by the nation's feelings revealed about the Holocaust, the Zionists had managed to obtain an international warrant for a small piece of earth for the Jewish people. What remained was for the Jews to translate the formal leasehold into concrete possession and statehood in war, and for the Palestinians to pay the price. When the Arabs walked out of the General Assembly declaring that partition would lead to war, it was not an idle threat. In June of '46, the Arab League had secretly pledged funds, arms, and volunteers to the Palestinians. On September 16, '47, the League decided to establish an Arab Liberation Army composed of Palestinians and volunteers from the Arab states. In November, the Syrian army began registering volunteers and set up a training camp. Fawzi al-Hawji, who had sat out the war years in Germany, broadcasting the Nazi message to the Arab world, was named commander. Amin al-Husseini bitterly opposed the appointment. Since the Arab revolt, he had seen Kawuji, blah, 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 etc. So you mentioned the Nakba, and this is what I was asking about. I was like, what led to the Nakba? And you seem to just say a decade of stuff. That's not true. As I said before, the Palestinian plan very clearly led to Arab aggression afterwards because they were not happy with the results. I don't see anything in this anymore spoke about them secretly.
Yeah, you're picking a day and acting as if nothing previous had any.
Because all of this is fine. All this is quite accurate. The whole question about the Palestinians paying the price for somebody else's crap. I mean, the only part that I have a quibble with in that entire section is that the Palestinians would have been a minority in part of the country, and they wouldn't have been. And at no point did, if you took the UN partition plan exactly right, the Jews would still have been a minority in their own side. They still would have been.
They would have been a 55%, 45% majority minority in that particular area because I believe the partition plan, as part of it, had some amount of transfer that was going to happen after the land was partitioned.
Meaning ethnic cleansing.
Well, that ethnic cleansing is the term that we've invented today. Yes, but at the time it would have just been called population transfer. Yes.
Okay, but so it's assuming that was the case regardless. There's no place they would have. That's the only part that's inaccurate about all this. The whole point here is what people anywhere in the world would accept a wave of migrants coming in only a 20-year period and then seizing half of the territory. Are you suggesting that you do not have any sympathy whatsoever for Native Americans?
We're not even talking about that. We're not talking about. This has nothing to do with anything. This is how I feel like this is the game. Hold on, to be clear, this is the game that pro-Palestinian historians play when you're fabricating like what's happened historically. Is instead of actually focusing on the discrete true events that have happened and then connecting them in a coherent narrative, it's always bouncing from one moral justification to one factoid to one moral thing. It's not actually engaging with what's happening in the underlying history.
No, you're doing the exact opposite.
I'm not. I'm trying to establish factually what's happened at different points in history.
No, because when we reference 1948, you go, that has no bearing on what happened in 48, pre-1948. You act as if those are not connected.
I'm not acting like that at all. I'm just trying. You can't even agree on what happened in 48.
No, a couple of minutes ago you said, so it had nothing. You said this is exactly the reason the 48 war was specifically this.
The 48 war occurred because of the rejection of the partition plan and the Arab...
No!
Okay.
Reread your section! The section you just read disproves what you just said in your analysis.
I don't know if... What do you think I read that just disproves what I just said?
The passage you just read out loud said that the Jesus Christ. How the fuck can you read this and not understand it? It has nothing to do with other outside players not liking the situation. Palestinians weren't even present at the UN. They asked for it to be deferred so they could actually put together a delegation and be there, and the UN said fuck no. So they're not even there. 2, it mentioned in the section you read out loud Why would they accept the loss of their land? Why should they pay the price for other people's desire to make up for the Holocaust?
You're explaining why they rejected the partition plan. Yes.
Majority. You read in a section they're a majority in the land, and it's carving their country up because of someone else's fuck up.
Yes.
If you read that carefully, you would understand the same basic moral point and factual point that all the historians are saying in this. And you're just
hold on, just to be ultra clear, you understand that this historian that you cited agrees with me, right? You understand that, right?
No, the passage you just read out loud contradicts the analysis you just made.
I literally had a 5-hour debate alongside this historian, and we talked for 5 hours the previous day. He agrees with me 100% on this point. I don't know why you would say this.
No, he agrees that ethnic cleansing is moral. He thinks that it's fine.
Hold on. No, you're ethnic cleansing to you're a historian, right? Why would you apply that retroactively to an agreement made between two peoples? Was when Turkey and Greece had their massive population transfer, was that ethnic cleansing?
Hold on, Destiny. What two people? Be very specific. What two people?
Ethnic cleansing?
What?
No one agreed to the agreement.
I don't think ethnic cleansing even existed as a term until after the 90s. I think it was in relation to Yugoslavia. People started to use the term ethnic cleansing.
Genocide then.
What?
Because ethnic cleansing is a subset of genocide, so I'll just call it genocide then. Will that make you happier?
No, because I don't think the Genocide Convention was until 49 or whatever. So I don't even. But it wasn't even a genocide either.
So the Herero genocide in 1905 wasn't a genocide because the convention didn't exist. The Armenian genocide
I would say no. I mean, yeah, the Armenian genocide. No, yeah, and the Holocaust also happened before the genocide convention. I'm just saying that, like, I don't think I would consider any part of this a genocide. But that's a totally separate conversation. I'm just trying to figure out, like, the chain of events.
Morris understands what happened, and he has written about it. His first major book was literally on the expulsion of Palestinians. The only difference between Morris and other people is that he justifies it morally, is that he supports the idea. He takes Ben Gurion's position that it was a morally just thing to do.
I think he said it was.
You're arguing semantics of, like, the term didn't exist, so thus it was okay to do.
Because ethnic cleansing is not an attempt to have an actual factual analysis of what's happening. It's a cheap attempt to sneak a bunch of normative baggage in order to try to say that a particular thing was completely abhorrent or wrong, when at the time, that wasn't how anybody in the world viewed it. Like, imagine the idea of, like, oh, we passed a UN resolution 181.
That's wildly dishonest. That's not wildly dishonest.
Okay, hold on. So then wait. So for resolution 181.
And the Greco-Turkish War in 1922.
That was viewed as ethnic. Hold on. That was viewed as ethnic cleansing.
Put somebody who an architect of that ethnic cleansing on their second Pascal white paper.
Yes, and you think that was considered an ethnic cleansing?
When you uproot 2 million people from their homes, that is ethnic cleansing by definition.
He's saying because the term didn't exist back then, you can't name it that. That's one of the worst arguments I've ever heard.
Okay, so just to be clear, so you're saying that
if you're trying to argue that gravity didn't exist until Newton named it.
Gravity is a feature of the universe, ideally. I don't think that gravity is the same.
It's a description of something that happens.
Yeah, you're just naming a name, but that's the equivalent of saying slavery is not bad because the term slavery didn't exist back then. Or we're not going to call it, like, you're doing, gravity existed. It's a thing, whether you call it gravity or not. That's what happened. And guess what? You prove your point by saying, hold on, but you prove your point. You disprove yourself by saying, oh, this was like a normal thing that happened. It wasn't normal because that's why the Arabs were getting upset in the first place.
No, what do you mean it wasn't normal? Every single country in Europe that had fought wars in World War I, you had the dissolution of multiple powers that broke off into huge states. And you had the huge. Just keep shouting. Yeah, this is the pro-Palestinian side has no argument. It is why it always turns into. It's like unbelievable. Oh my god.
Palestinian side.
I can't even ask a question. No, I'm just like basic questions.
Everyone did it. Everyone did it, man.
Do you think do you think that the population exchange between Greece and Turkey was that seen as a massively unethical, horrible, evil thing?
Palestinians.
Yeah, you're not even answering the question. You won't even answer. You won't even engage.
Because you're comparing things that were Palestinians in the agreement.
It was unjust to uproot 2 million people from their homes, and it was discussed as unjust at the time.
And so it would have been a better result had those people stayed.
Yes, because the nation state is a fucking stupid idea. The idea that claiming that Turkish people need to be Muslim and Orthodox people need instead to be Greek regardless of what language they speak is fundamentally racist and unjust. Obviously, staying in their own homes would have been better. Expelling people from Greece just because they're Muslim
It wasn't expelling them just because they were Muslim. It was because there was a history of violence. Look at who's being reductive now. There was a ton of violence that was occurring with the people that were living in these regions. So a population transfer to move everybody apart so they stop fucking killing each other is what they had mutually agreed upon and decided. And it's why the population transfer is probably way fucking better than keeping people there and having them fight forever.
These kind of ideas, this basic nationalist point here has been, if you're going to judge it based on whether it is effective at reducing violence, it's been the stupidest idea in human history because it has caused more deaths than any other ideology.
So you think that
Muslim villagers in the Peloponnese were killing Greeks. You're just making shit up.
Wait, was there not like a huge amount of Greek people that had been killed up to that population transfer? Wasn't there like almost 1 million that had essentially been genocided?
No. If you're talking about Greeks being killed by the Ottoman government, that's irrelevant to what happened in the Peloponnese. It's a completely different fucking country.
The Ottoman government was what happened from 1900 or from 1910 to 1920. Hold on, let me just hear this. You're telling me that the Ottoman Empire, that government was completely and totally fundamentally different from what would become the country of Turkey? Completely and totally different thing, not related at all.
No, I'm pointing out that you're not capable of listening because I said the Peloponnese, which was in the country of Greece since 1821. For 100 years, it had been part of a different country entirely, and the Muslims who lived in that territory were expelled to Turkey. You're talking about a different country entirely.
My understanding is that
Greeks were not killing Greeks. They were Greek.
Well, okay.
They were just
what is your understanding or background information related to the Pontic genocide when the 300 to 500,000 Greek people were killed?
If you want to talk about the Ottoman genocides, cool. I have an entire shelf on this. It has nothing to do with the expulsion of Muslims from Greece.
But it wasn't just from Greece. It was a population transferred from both. It was two-way, was it not?
It was.
Then why do you just say
unjust on both sides?
Okay. So the alternative of them remaining in both areas and having another genocide or massive massacres occur would have been preferable?
Or the alternative is, how about two racist nation states are terrible governments that shouldn't exist?
I don't understand why we're saying racist nation states. These are countries that had, you have some support of your people.
Greece was the first successful modern nation state. A country organized around a particular ethnic group and for its benefit. The Ottoman genocides are based in Turkish nationalism, and created the nation state of Turkey in the aftermath of that.
There was no There was no idea behind racial domination of Turkish people over like Arabs throughout like the Ottoman Empire. People didn't have contentions or issues relating to that, or differences between like Turkish people or Arabs or Persians. What?
Prior to the 19th century, the concept didn't exist, and the populations were all intermingled perfectly well. No, the idea.
Okay, hold on, wait. I just want to stake strong claims on it. So just so I'm clear, you're telling me that in the 19th century, all of the different demographics of the Ottoman Empire all saw themselves as more or less the same. The Arabs, I guess didn't feel like they were subject to the Turkish people. You're telling me that's not a thing at all. Didn't feel any particular type of way about like the Turks that ran the Ottoman Empire essentially. All of them basically saw themselves as the same or intermixed, or there was no like ethnic or identities along racial lines for any of these people.
I can't imagine what any of that has to do with anything I just said. So no, I can't go along with whatever you just made up. Obviously, people understand that the people in this village speak a different language from me, but that there were Pontic Greeks for 2,800 years in that area, and they only became a problem in the late 19th century, should tell you something. No one was trying to eliminate Pontic Greeks in the 15th century. No one cared. It was fine. They paid their taxes. They had the right to practice their religion. No one gave a shit. The populations were all intermingled, but people spoke different languages, had different cultures, had different religions. So what? Nationalism as a concept didn't exist yet. And nationalism is what requires ethnic cleansings or genocides.
So there were no nationalism throughout all of Europe or anything. The first one was Greece in what year?
The first nationalism and the first creation of a nation state was revolutionary France, but it collapsed back into the Bourbon Restoration. The first one to actually create a country that stood was Greece, starting with the uprising in 1821.
Sure.
And then across the 19th century, nationalisms gradually
This
gained
should
root
be
in tons of
interesting.
existing countries and then created whole new countries
This
like
one is
Italy
in
and
the
Germany that had
bag.
never existed. As
And
well as
people didn't
breaking
see
tons of
themselves
territories
as
out.
separated on
Right.
ethnic or cultural identities prior to this? None of this?
What was that?
And people didn't see themselves separated along cultural or racial lines at all prior to this? They were all just like intermingled groups of people that all, like within their borders, got along and didn't kill.
Recognize differences. That has nothing to do with what I'm talking about. The recognition of difference does not require a political order that serves only people like you. That's a very different argument.
And people like you can't just be citizens of a country.
Okay, look, a country
Anyone know where we're
can
going?
have peoples speaking any number of languages and religions and cultures.
What's over here?
Our country is
It's
like
almost
that.
time for
Tons of
everybody to
languages and
die.
cultures here.
Sure, but our country, I think, is relatively unique, at least if you're in the United States.
Not at all. No,
Just
it's
follow
it's
my
not,
tail.
and actually, it's still more problematic than most pre-modern states.
The
where that
United
difference
States,
is
the
just the
fact that
norm.
we are a nation of people that came from a completely other country without like a definitive ethnic like background or anything is not.
I'll use France as an example.
Trails?
France has existed since the 5th century. Do you like that? France has existed since the 5th century consistently. The French state had Bretons and Gascons and Picards and Alsatians and Occitan peoples all across this island, Provençal, tons of peoples, tons of languages, tons of cultures. They weren't all French because most people didn't speak French. French was spoken in the area around Paris. French was one language among many. So obviously anybody recognized
time.
if I travel 50 miles down the road, they're going to speak a different language from me, and who cares? We all paid our taxes to the king. That it didn't matter.
It's all on
The
the way.
the variations didn't mean that somebody had to impose a
Always
single
wanted to
identity
go
and
this way.
language. That sense of a national identity that's connected to political power and a single state language, culture, whatnot, that's a modern idea. Most countries before the modern period were incredibly diverse by default.
Do you agree with that, or are you saying no?
I'm
Unless you wanna
positive
correct
that's
him.
wrong, but I don't have the historical background to argue that.
But how do you know it's wrong then? Hold on, Liam. Yeah,
Scrod?
but hold on, Liam.
Because I know there were conquests based on religion. I know that there were conquests based on
Can you
like
cite?
kings.
Can you cite? Where did you get that from? Right. We earlier we had Liam cited. Could you pull up the book that you cite that from? That just.
Can I pull up the book that the Crusades existed,
Where's
or
the
that Caliphites existed, or what? I'm sorry, which book do you want me to pull up?
Have nothing to do with
be
this
right
because
back.
the Crusaders were themselves a giant mix of different national identities.
Careful!
The
No, whoa,
Crusaders
whoa, whoa!
spoke
Careful!
a
Don't say that. Wait,
dozen
wait. You
different
just said
languages.
national identities don't exist. So no, it was just a bunch of random people, not a bunch of different national identities, right?
No, I said nationalism. Nationalism is a political ideology. Nations are groups of people with something in common.
What is the thing in
If you
common?
organize itself that way, you know, race, ethnicity, culture, and nation all pretty much mean the same thing depending on context, but they all have basically the same definition. They're groups of people with something in common.
It's how
That's
I
it.
live.
What were the things
How
in
you
common
use
between in the pre-1900s? What were the things that people had in common?
Yeah.
Where?
Speaking the same language.
I thought you just said they
dancing
all
to
had
the
different
same
languages
music,
in different villages.
having the same clothes. I mean, tons of people can have. What?
Time to kill
I thought you just said there weren't shared languages in these places. Maybe I'm misunderstanding you, or
Yeah, I don't know what that means at all. I mean, I just mentioned that France had 24 different languages spoken.
so how is that a commonality they have? If I'm asking you what are the things that these pre-nationalistic nations had in common?
In Gascony, they spoke Gascon. So you could say that there is a group of people in one area that speak a particular language. They're not French in the sense of a national identity. They're French in the sense of their citizenship and a state identity. They're part of the French kingdom, but they speak Gascon, not French. The idea that there should be one language, one culture, one national identity for a country is very much a modern idea.
Okay,
And
when
you
you
were
say
saying-
nationalism, or what is your definition of nationalism or nation? I guess.
Nationalism is the idea that nations deserve a state.
Selfish.
A state that serves their interests. And once that exists, then any policy that supports the interests of that nation versus any other.
So what's the difference between like a kingdom or like a king that has territory that he defends with the military versus like a nation?
Because a nation is only a group of people. A nation has no political concept. State, country, and nation are different things. A state is governing institutions. So orders, laws, a monarchy. A country is a state that's sovereign. So it controls its own territory. So in most cases, you can put those together. Palestine, for example, is a state, but it's not a country because it's not sovereign. But most cases, state and country can be put together. A nation is just a group of people with something in common. Nationalism says this group of people should have a state that serves their interests.
No worries.
And only their interests.
Okay, gotcha. All right.
Nationalism is not remotely related to patriotism.
Do you agree with that? So we understand, or you're saying that's wrong?
Using those definitions, I've heard this before, but this is like a very academic engagement with the term, so I don't use them regularly.
Well, yeah, it's academic as opposed to just random people talking, yeah, but I'm going to use the technical definitions.
You can use the technical definitions, that's fine. When I say it's academic, what I mean is outside of a school, nobody uses these words like this, so I'm not aware of how you're using it in this particular definition. I'm not saying you're wrong, I'm just saying that outside, nation, country, and state are roughly used like interchangeably between people, but yeah.
So
but I
let's talk about something. After he finished him discussing a little bit about French and how it was made up of different groups, you had said you think that's because I asked you. I said you agree with that. You said that's wrong. Can you tell me what part that? So I want to understand this. What part of that was wrong about the diversity of France at that time? Do you have evidence to showcase what you're saying? I'd like to.
No, I think I probably roughly agree with him. But when he said there were no,
but you said you didn't agree with him. You said you said.
I'm
word
so
for
sorry.
word.
My bad. You interrupted my answer with another question. So yeah, so I think probably with the way that he's using these words, if this is like on the strict academic lines, I imagine I would probably agree. When he said things like there are no nations or whatever prior to that, I didn't understand that what the context of the word nation. That's why I just asked him. That's why I asked him a few seconds ago. When you say nation or nationalism, what exactly are you talking about? So then I probably do agree with him. Yes.
No nationalisms. No, but there were plenty of nations. A nation is just a group of people with something in common, usually organized in some particular way. So in this way, you could say because there are local organizations and local institutions, then there was a Gascon nation. But, that was obviously distinct from the French state that they were part of. The French nationalism is what imposed the French language and has been slowly destroying the language in Gascony. So that there are different issues, but there was a.
How would you describe how would you describe a caliphate?
I don't know. It's too vague. What do you mean? How would I describe? It's a distinct form of government.
Would you consider this like a nation, a state, a country? If you're looking at like the Ottoman Empire, what would you have considered that?
Both a state and a country because it's sovereign, as in no one else claims the territory, and it's a state in the sense that it has institutions and laws. So it would be a state. I mean, technically, it's easier to use roughly terms like empire for it, although, again, it's relatively rough. They're not exactly equivalent, but it's a little closer to the structure because they're bureaucratic states akin to, say, like the Roman or Persian empires. So it's a large, bureaucratic empire. But such states are, by definition, incredibly diverse because they're usually much larger than normal states, smaller states. So within any of the
you would say for the Ottoman Empire, you would consider that to be what, a nation, a state, and a country, or
it was not a nation. I mean, there were tons of nations in it. The Ottoman Empire is a multinational body.
So then, would you say is the United States a nation?
All empires in human history have been multinational.
Is the United States a nation then, or no?
The United States has what we call a civic nationalism that's based in a common history and documents. So, Declaration of Independence, blah, 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 certain shared histories, certain myths. George Washington chopped down a cherry tree, blah, blah, blah. It's like crap like that you feed into people. It has what we call a civic nationalism, not an ethnic nationalism, not one based in a particular group of people. The founders of this country even rejected creating an official language, so the U.S. doesn't have one.
Okay, so interesting. Okay, yeah.
Actually, but for the most part, the U.S. is a multinational state more akin to ancient empires in many ways, and has always had multiple nationalities within it, which is one of the reasons you have like weird-ass white nationalists and Christian nationalists, and there's tons of like different distinct local cultures, African-American Southern culture, and Latino culture, the Southwest, and blah, blah, blah. There's tons of different distinct cultural groupings within the U.S. But all.
So within the Ottoman Empire, would you say the Turks had a distinct national identity, or no?
They did, because they're Turkic speakers. Yeah, they spoke a form of the Oghuz Turkic language, so they have a Turkish identity, and they were a Sunni Muslim. nearly all.
Probably the
So
right way.
Do you
they,
think there
they
was
had
conflict
basic elements of a national identity. What changes there is that national identity begins arguing in the later 19th century that the entire empire is theirs and just for them and not for all the other peoples, like the Ionian Greeks and the Pontic Greeks and the Assyrians and the Chaldeans and Syriacs and, Levantine Arabs and Mesopotamian Arabs and Kurds and, Turkmen and tons of other peoples who spoke completely different languages and had nothing to do with them. They get steamrolled because of a Turkish nationalism. But a Turkish nation definitely predates it.
Okay.
Again,
And I wanna-
nations and nations are different things.
I want to go back to something too earlier. You guys had disagreed on this, and I want to talk a little bit about it. I want to ask you guys.
This way.
Destiny, you said when we're talking about Syria and
Hold on.
independence or them having a democracy, you were saying you disagree with that. There's no evidence to
I'm
that.
not aware of a thriving Syrian democracy prior to 48. I'm not aware of that. But I
Not
also don't know if
thriving,
there
it was
But wait,
extremely fragile and
what is thriving? I don't understand.
like a healthy democracy that was like running valid elections that everybody agreed upon that were like was a healthy
It has
democracy.
to be like a perfect, almost perfect is the only way
I
that
never
you
said even
count it.
close to perfect. If you got
But
that,
you
then
were
you're not
sa-
listening to a single word that I'm saying. Do you think do you think a democracy where the vote is seen as like relatively legitimate and most people have access to whatever? Do you think it's a perfect democracy?
Well, but that's what I'm saying. Mostly legitimate. I mean, look at around the world that we see today. This ideation of like you're trying to say like only if it's like mostly legitimate, which it's impossible to tell on any capacity. But
It's
Liam,
impossible to tell if any democracy is legitimate or not.
I'm saying what you're saying is you're saying that you need proof that it needs to be like these were fair elections, things like that. Correct? That's the only way that you
I'm not even.
consider it
I'm not even. I just said I'm legitimately. I'm not aware of a thriving, healthy democracy in Syria prior
No.
to 48. My understanding is that because most of my history for Israel is 48 and afterwards. But for 48 and afterwards, my understanding is that whenever there were attempted negotiations with Syria, there were always coups or leaders being replaced and like having even like normal, ordinary
what
conversations
you
that
did-
was incredibly difficult. And so it would be surprising to me intuitively that healthy democracy existed in Syria prior to 48, and then after 48 completely collapsed and went away. So my assumption would be that there probably wasn't. That was my assumption.
There have been zero healthy democracies anywhere in the Middle
That's
East,
the one.
including Israel. None of them are healthy democracies. None of them have ever been healthy democracies. There have been various states of flawed democracy or fragile democracies. And some of those fragile ones have collapsed relatively quickly. Syria was pushed toward independence because of a free French and British invasion during World War II in 43.
Believe it.
And then in 46, France tried to reconquer it, had to be pushed back out, largely by British pressure. They had less than 3 years before it collapsed into a military coup, because France, during its colonial period, had only really developed the military as an effective institution and had downplayed everything else. And the different regions of Syria were actually governed up until independence as completely separate states. So there was no real regional integration in the country either. So of course it was incredibly fragile and couldn't make it as a democracy. It was intended to be a democracy. They put together a constitution as a democracy, but it collapsed almost immediately.
Hang on.
So, but you brought it up because you were saying, I'm not aware of anybody in the Arab world who ever wanted democracy. Why would Palestinians want democracy? No, people have been talking about democracy in the Arab world since the 19th century.
Okay, interesting. Because my understanding was one of the big follies of Western countries trying to impose democratic rule onto countries in the Middle East is fundamentally flawed, because sometimes these people, for whatever reason, in these countries gravitate more towards secular dictatorship. What?
If you push, impose is the key word in what you just said. If you push anything by force, people are going to resist it. That's
Sure.
something.
Well, maybe.
People talk about democracies and trying to build democracies for a long time, but they've largely been stymied by the progress of colonialism, then neo-imperialism, and then the rise of tons of contrary ideals like Arab nationalism and whatnot. There's been tons of things that have gotten in the way of making it work. But people have been trying for it for a long time.
Okay, so when we look at the democracy in Syria, was that a democracy that existed in Syria because people wanted it, or was that like a remnant of the French mandate before the mandate period expired?
No, the French mandate actually resisted the idea of any representative institutions for them. That goes all the way back to the beginnings of the mandates when they Syrians, in combination with some Hijazi elements, actually tried to create a government in 1919 as a constitutional monarchy, a democracy, and France invaded and conquered the territory to prevent that democracy from developing. France always opposed any kind of democratic institutions in the area, and were intent on blocking that.
Why would France oppose a democratic institution in a state that it just has a mandate over?
Because the mandate system was a kind of disguised colonialism, because high imperialism was growing less popular with voters. So Britain and France came up with a way to hide what they were doing through the League of Nations, come up with a more indirect way to do it, steer them to a kind of moderate independence where they would, control large parts of their foreign policy and keep military bases, etc. So it's a kind of colonialism.
I thought the mandate system was like a rejection of the old systems of colonialism. But the reason behind the mandate systems was because the idea of trying to control all these places for foreign powers just wasn't an effective way to do it. So the mandate system was the idea of we're going to allow these countries to have some people and we're going to let them figure their shit out. And then after the mandate expires, whoever's like the major controlling power there gets autonomy over the state.
If you want to stay at the level of the propaganda they aim at sixth graders, then sure. That's what they were saying. It's not what anyone was discussing. It's not what happened in the negotiations that created the mandates in the first place. It's not what the people doing this were trying to do. We know what they were after and why they did it. Again, records exist.
Okay, but then why is it? Then we look at it like Israel in particular. Why didn't the Brits just like fully support the Israelis in creating a nation state and just having them as their like colonial puppet?
The British tried to use Zionist Jews to create a loyal minority on the ground to entrench their kind of permanent indirect control of Palestine once it was independent. But they were trying to manipulate them the same way that the French were manipulating Maronites.
Wait, hold on. The question is, why is it that pre-48, why didn't the Brits just continue to like ship in and support Jewish people in Palestine to control that area? If that was the goal of the mandate system, why wouldn't they have just done that?
Because it wasn't the goal of the mandate system.
If the goal was to have like a colonialist puppet, I'm sorry, can you restate what you said the goal was?
The goal of the mandate system was to create independent countries that were part of the imperial frameworks and could then be indirectly pushed around. In the same way that, say, the U.S. has consistently pushed around much of Latin America, or the British Empire, or
Hold on, wait. Let me just understand. So when you say colonialism, you just mean having another country that would be like an ally of yours. That's.
I mean colonialism until you can build institutions that will maintain a permanent connection to your empire, to the metropole.
Like through trade, that's colonialism, or
through trade, through political institutions, through political ideologies. You have liberté, égalité, fraternité outside of Syrian government buildings. I mean, the idea was to, assimilate people into your empire and then spin them off as semi-independent but connected to it. And again, the same way that, say, most of West Africa is still connected to France to the present day. It was intended to create those kind of neo-imperial links after decades of direct control. So it's trying to you need the decades of direct control, and initially because none of these areas made sense as countries. They were all slapped together. I mean, the regions of Iraq had nothing to do with one another until Britain slapped them all together and made Iraq out of it. So you've got to build institutions commonly throughout the area that are in your interest, and then retreat from that. That's the goal there. And the British intended to use Zionist migrants to create a Europeanized loyal population to help them to acculturate the rest of the country to working within the context of British imperialism. But
why didn't they just support that all the way?
An Arab state of Palestine that would have a Jewish minority.
Why didn't they just push that then over any Palestinian autonomy in the region? Then I don't understand. Why wouldn't they just continue to support Jews all the way up through 48?
Well, the main reason they didn't support anybody at that point is because they had been dealing with 15 years of consistent terror attacks, oftentimes by Zionists, but also by Palestinians attacking them and trying to get rid of them.
Oh wait, hold on, wait, real quick. So who did most of the terrorist attacks?
Well, there were a ton of Zionist terrorist attacks, against British targets, against Palestinians.
Why did the Zionist terrorist attacks happen?
It's all on the way.
Because from their perspective, they were waging an anti-colonial struggle. They needed to get rid of the UK because the UK was the only significant obstacle to them creating the state that they wanted, because they knew they could beat the Palestinians. This was already true by the beginning of the 1930s. And again, there's a massive paper trail from the Zionists themselves on the ground. They knew that they could crush the Palestinians at any point, so Britain had to be driven out. And they proceeded to make the occupation extremely expensive for Britain through those kind of attacks. And especially after World War II, when you've just fought yourself to a standstill, you've got to focus on trying to hold on to what's left of your empire. The places that are causing you more money, that are expensive, that you have to put more troops and police involved in, those are the ones they cut their losses and left on. This is a process that the Dutch, the French, the Brits all had to go through after World War II, was figuring out where to try and hold on to power and where to let go.
Okay.
And they decided pretty early on, after World War II, that they were not going to try and hold Palestine.
I totally disagree with that characterization, but I don't know. Where do you want to go from this?
So I can learn from your point of view. Can you cite me sources where you're saying you disagree and that proves otherwise?
From
What are you talking about? Which
from
papers?
36 to 39. I know there was a bunch of fighting from Arabs that were protesting the massive intake of Jewish people into the mandatory area. But I'm pretty sure in response to all of that violence afterwards, Britain was the one that started to severely limit the Jewish immigration that went into. They limited the Jewish immigration. I think they started embargoing because of all the violence that was happening there. Because the Arab people were super fucking ass mad, and everything was like getting fucked in that area. It was becoming untenable. And that eventually, once they started to
you back up. You just explained this whole
hold on,
situation.
stop. Why do you always have to back up to the Palestinian reason, and we can't just speak from any particular point of view? I mean, we can go all the way back to 1880. I'm going to finish explaining this one section instead of you crying to go back to where the Palestinians are the good guys. Okay, so from 36 to 39, there were Arab revolts. From 36 to 39, there were Arab revolts, and then in response to those Arab revolts, the British started to lock down on Jewish immigration and embargo weapons and everything going into the Jews, and then the Jewish people started to revolt. I think from 40 to it might have been all the way to 47. So several years after that, there was that the King Cross Hotel bombing or King David Hotel bombing or whatever. There was a bunch of terrorist attacks, especially from the Irgun and the Leahy against British troops, and eventually Britain was like, "Fuck you guys, we're leaving. This is all fun." But the Jewish terrorist attacks against Britain weren't just random or happened because whatever reason you just gave, they wanted to get rid of the British because they were in between them and the Arabs. Because Britain was starting to limit the amount of Jews that were able to go into.
It was before that though too.
No, I don't believe it. I don't. Okay. Can
Britain's limitation came in 1939.
Yes.
Attacks by Irgun against the Brits started years before that point.
What were some of the major? Yeah. What were some of the major reasons? Or
go back almost.
You said there was. Was there attacks? Yeah, this is why we go back because you're
not going back. You're not going to answer any of my questions. Just to be clear, I'll put these out here, and neither of you are going to answer these. Okay. My question was: are there any major attacks before, before 1939, from the Jewish people to Britain, and what were some of those attacks?
Yes.
Okay. I don't think you're going to answer either of those, but
yes. In fact, you just named one. The King David Hotel bombing was 1937.
No, that was
before migration.
No, I'm pretty sure that was 10 years later. I think that happened in 44, 45, maybe 46.
Oh, 47. Yeah. So 40. Oh, yeah. That one. No, I'm not talking about the limitation. Sorry, I'm just mixing it up with your discussion about why were they still trying not to. Why did they give up?
Can we cite?
Why did they give up?
We can pull them up. Can we cite? And you're of the mindset that there were no major attacks before 1939.
I don't think there were any major. I don't think there were any major Jew to British attacks that happened before 1940.
Now you've got a major. So lynching British soldiers and hanging them from trees wouldn't be major.
Yeah, when did that happen? Or who was doing that? What was that in response to?
Irgun did that.
So Irgun, lynching, British soldiers.
How about the souk bombings? They were putting out bombs in crowded marketplaces in a territory that Britain was obligated to control in 1937.
Okay, what was that one called? So I looked up Night of the Beating. I see refers to an Irgun operation carried out on December 29th of 46.
1937 Irgun souk bombing, or marketplace bombing. They killed 80 people or so in a crowded marketplace in a terrorist attack.
In 37 or in 38?
37.
Are these look like attacks against Arabs?
Just follow my tail.
I.e., citizens of the Mandate. They were literal citizens of the country.
But they were against Arabs, not against British troops.
List in 38, two British policemen were killed by a bomb train in Haifa.
Oh, you said in 38, 2 British policemen were killed by a bomb in a train in Haifa? Why did you leave out the 2 Arabs right before that? I'm probably looking at the exact same thing you are. Why did you not just read that?
But you said they... Sure, they can do both. Are you saying that your mindset is immediately the default that the Jewish people, they accidentally killed the 2 policemen, but they were targeting just the 2 Arabs?
That would be my guess, yes.
Why is that always your default? I don't understand.
It's not always my default. It's because up to that...
Show me evidence to support that.
I mean,
my understanding would be up to the... You're just going to scream over me. I'm not going to... The reason why I would assume this is because...
what Irgun was saying at the time. I mean, because Irgun did describe itself as fighting an anti-colonial struggle against the Brits. The only reason they stopped fighting during World War II was because the Brits were fighting the Nazis. So Lehi was formed as a splinter specifically because of that, so they could keep attacking the Brits during World War II. But that decision was made by the mid-30s.
Okay, then I'm just curious where all the attacks are against British people then prior to 1939, 1940.
Look at what they said.
No, I don't care what they said. I'm looking for evidence of attacks, even hangings, even 1 or 2 people dying. I'm just curious. My understanding is that didn't really happen until after the 40s. Then it started to happen a lot.
Well, no, it did, but okay.
Also, we have to be keeping in mind, too, that the Irgun and the Lehi were not the most popular divisions of the pre-IDF formation, right, of the Jewish Defense Forces, right? These were literally the terrorist, radical aspects of the pre-Israeli fighting forces.
They were the right-wingers, that's it. It was an ideological difference.
No, it was a difference in tactics as well. That
ideological differences. The Irgun was formed as the militia attached to the revisionist Zionist movement, not to the WZO.
Sure, you can call it just the righties, but they were engaged in more terroristic elements than I believe the Haganah was generally willing to sign off on as well, and they were a fraction of the size.
Ghana did plenty of fucked up stuff. That's not the main issue. The main difference is ideological between them.
Okay, doesn't change my point that I don't believe there was much due to British violence pre-1940.
I'm king. Got heaps of them.
And I think that's evidenced by the fact that we're trying to point to the even attacks that are done by the Lehi and the Irgun, and we were clearly leaving out the Haganah, which was the majority of the fighting force. There's a reason why it was the only ones. Mainly, I think a lot of this violence came from these more radical groups, but also again.
So your point of view is that
Wikipedia's list is pretty shitty, but there's a whole bunch of lists even on Wiki here. I mean, just in basic shit, and this is not complete, even close. But you've got attacks here in 44, 45, 46, 47, all against British soldiers.
Really?
You got a bombing, 17 British officers killed during a bombing of the Goldsmith Officers Club.
What are we talking about?
The bombing of the British Embassy in Rome in 1946.
Yeah, what are we talking about right now? Yes.
Attacks on the British government.
His point of view is that they were perfectly fine with Britain. They were totally fine with Britain.
So 3 British
this area.
Sure. Okay. So just to be clear, this is the strategy, right? Is when bad stuff is happening on the Palestinian side, it's always everybody's doing violence, and when bad things are happening only on the Jewish side, it's only the Jews doing violence. Okay. So earlier, pre-40, the violence was generally Arab to.
No one said that.
You're bringing up examples.
Every time Palestinians commit violence, I don't support any of the Palestinian government factions. They've all been assholes.
Okay, well then let me restate that earlier question. Before 1940, where was the majority of the violence, the vast majority of violence coming from? Towards the British.
Now you tell me.
Was it everybody or was it mainly Arabs?
Towards the British?
Yes.
Obviously, the majority population, the Palestinians, who were fighting an anti-colonial struggle as well.
Okay.
Both sides saw themselves as fighting an anti-colonial struggle. One massively outnumbers the other, ergo, more attacks come from that side. This is like arithmetic.
It's not like arithmetic, but also, so that means that the Jewish people weren't fighting against the Brits because they were preventing.
Numerically, if you look by proportion of population, the Zionists are consistently more lethal.
Always a step ahead.
What do we disagree with here then? I guess we're in full agreement.
Well, I think was your point that the Irgun and all these groups, they supported Britain before 1939.
I think the Jewish people in general, were more aligned with the Brits pre-40, pre-40, whenever the. No way.
Well, hold on. Can you point me to some citation of this so I can read into it?
I don't know what are you asking for in particular?
You are saying that the mindset of Irgun and the Jewish population at the time was in support of the mandate, in support of Britain being in there. So can you please point me to something so I can read that?
Sure. Benny Morris has a book called Righteous Victims, where he talks about that time period. Shlomo Ben-Ami has a book called Scars of War, Wounds of Peace. Benny Morris has another book called The Birth of Palestine, which talks about a lot of that period. There's a book by Ian Black called Enemies and Neighbors that I already did give you. Hold on, I did give you. What specifically are you asking me? What is the question?
Yes, let me talk. Because you actually told me that can you point to me, it could be the chapter, it could be anything that I can go and pull up right now.
I don't know. Do you own these books? Are you willing to buy them on Kindle right now?
Yeah, yes. I have millions of dollars. Yes, I can afford a $10 book. We can do that for the sake of this one.
And then what particular are you asking me? And then I can find the passages for you if you want.
So I want the evidence that shows that Irgun and all these were in support of Britain being there. They had no problems with Britain. That they had a commonality and basically wanted to work together. So I want to go into that.
Well, I think the strongest.
Do you disagree that Irgun did not like Britain being there? That had a fight against it.
I don't know why you're fixated on Irgun. If you want the broadest understanding of this position, I would say just read the 1936 Peel Commission, that report. That's broadly outlining the British view of everything that was going on in that period. It's pretty supportive of the Jewish people that are there. They say a lot of. I can show you the full text of the Peel Commission if you want.
Yes, bleed for me.
Is that what you want? Would you like the text of the Peel Commission report?
Liam, what were you gonna say?
Here you go.
I'm just shocked at that characterization of it.
Characterization
of Peel.
What part are you shocked about?
Because that it's somehow the British position was supportive. Every time every one of the white papers issued by the British government was critical of the Zionist movement. Whether you're talking about from Pasfield to Peel, all the way to the 1939 white paper, they're all critical.
They are, yes, they're critical in parts, but they speak highly of them in other parts, yes.
Quite directly, these guys caused the problem.
No, that's not what it says in the Peel Commission. It says that both sides have issues accepting people.
1929, another one in 37, another one in 39. They all acknowledge the same basic reality.
That both sides. Why do you only ever talk about one side? These papers say that both sides are having problems getting along. They don't just blame one side. That's not true.
Yeah, obviously both sides don't get along.
No, hold on. That's not what you just said. You just said that they blame the Jews on this.
But do you think that there's a difference between people migrating in and the people living there? Is there a distinction to you, or those are the exact?
That's not a distinction that was generally drawn upon by the British. No, they're not saying like, well, these people moved here, so they shouldn't be here. That's why they suggested partition after 36.
And then why did they limit the people coming in?
They took that back because they realized it didn't work, so the partition plan was never actually offered. There was no partition.
What are you talking about? The partition plan came about, it started to be drafted in 39 after the Peel Commission, and that's what eventually came of Resolution 181 in the UN. That's what they voted on.
It started not 39, and they didn't do it. They went through multiple revisions of a map and decided this is completely unworkable, would require massive ethnic cleansing, no one would support it.
Nobody said ethnic cleansing. That didn't even exist in people's minds back then. So you're inventing that, number one. Number two, the partition plan from the UN. Really?
It's in the document.
Ethnic cleansing is in the documents?
The movement of population.
That wasn't considered an immoral or horrible or evil thing. That was a thing that two people agreed upon.
I didn't say that.
Then don't use the term ethnic. Then don't use the term ethnic cleansing. That's normative baggage that you're throwing there.
You think Britain balk at moving populations when they're willing to kill millions? Of course they didn't.
No, it wasn't about killing millions of people. It was about making a work.
Irrelevant. The fact that they were talking about massive movements of populations in order to create it and realizing it wouldn't work. That they couldn't create any viable states out of it.
Yeah, but it wasn't working because of the violence that was existing between the two peoples.
They rejected it. They rejected it as unworkable.
No. They rejected it together as unworkable. That's why partition came about.
Britain rejected partition as unworkable in 1937. Which is why the 1939 white paper argued for still a unitary Palestine and limiting the Jewish population to 1/3. Because they understood that partition couldn't work. They went through at least 4 different maps that I know of, and they rejected the idea.
By the time they got to the UN in 47, partition was the only thing that people had left. That's what they. No,
this is 37.
I understand.
You said Peel, I'm talking about Peel. I responded to what you said. Now you're shifting to 10 years later. You mentioned the Peel partition plan.
When Peel wrote his report, partition was seen as the only way out. A few years later,
and they rejected it.
A few years lader,
No, in that process, it was abandoned as unworkable.
Okay, and then they also if that's how you want to. Fine. Do you agree then that they abandoned the 39 idea of one state as unworkable?
Britain abandoned the entire mandate as unworkable.
Okay, so then, fine. Then in that case, everything was abandoned as unworkable. Fine, that's fine. And then the final word on it was the partition plan in the UN that the Arabs rejected.
In 1989, Britain's position was still one Palestine state, with Jewish population set at 1/3. That was Britain's official position and their last official position before they handed it over to the UN General Assembly.
I'll lead the way. Do what I do.
Britain's last position was still for a unitary Palestine.
But then that became unworkable. Nobody accepted that. I don't think the Arab side accepted that either. And then eventually the British plan came about.
Who was there to ask? But no, of course they wouldn't have. Why would they?
Okay, that's fine.
It doesn't.
I understand. Yes. At no point did the Arabs want a Jewish state in the Middle East. I agree with that. Okay, I'm glad we at least agree on that. Yes.
Of course not. At no point did they want a Jewish ethno-state that would expel them from their homes. Go figure.
No, they just wanted Arab ethno-states that could control who they lived in their countries. Yes, I understand. Yes.
The Lakota did not invite South Dakota onto its land. They had to accept it. Palestinians have been forced to accept the existence of Israel. But no one was going to say, hi, can you please take half of my land and make a country on it and expel a bunch of us? No one
that's
would
what
say
happens
that.
when you lose wars, unfortunately. Yes, when your country dissolves and you lose wars, you tend to lose territory. Your borders get reshuffled around as well. Yes. What?
This gives losing a war. Who started a war? What war?
World War I.
World War I has fuck all to do with the Palestinians. They got killed during World War I. 50,000 Palestinians were killed during World War I. That has nothing to do with them at all.
What do you mean? They were part of the country that dissolved, that owned the territory.
His point of view is that because the Ottomans owned the land, so technically at that point anyone can take it over.
Okay, so we're then okay. So if you're going to take a pro-imperialist position, then sure. Imperialism and colonization is fine. You can make those. You can defend that, but at least be honest. That I defend imperialism and colonialism, and then that's fine. I can't argue with that. It is a position. It is a moral position. People can take. I disagree with the morality of it, but that's beside the point.
Is that your position, Destiny?
In 1917, yeah, the Ottoman Empire collapsed. Britain had the rights to the land, and they decided to do with it as they would. And they had Britain and France had the mandate
I wouldn't
system.
argue that that's legitimate for any empire to seize territory from anybody else. I think the process.
I mean, they took it from the Ottoman Empire, who had that territory because they seized it as well. But I mean, sure, okay. You can disagree with all forms of colonialism, imperialism in the past. That's fine too. But that's what happened.
Always wanted to go this way.
It is what happened. Yeah, exactly. Britain seized the land, and then Britain had to decide what to do with it. And as of 1939, Britain still intended to create a Palestine.
When's the murder start?
Well, I don't think anybody was accepting anything past.
Yeah.
I think after past 36, I don't think anybody was accepting it. It's not like there was an acceptance of the 39 white paper by any side.
Any blood trails?
We're not talking about. There's nothing to accept. It's you just described a colonial occupation. Britain seized control of the land. Britain was the only sovereign.
Yeah, but the point of the mandate system was to, but the point of the mandatory system was to get away from the hardcore colonial projects and to give the people in the area a bit more autonomy. So it did matter if the people there accepted it. That's why Britain didn't just impose one state or impose partition. They voted on it in the UN, or they asked the people there what they wanted to do, and the representatives shot it down all the time.
No, they didn't do it in the sense of they wanted it to be fair. They did it because it cost them too much, and they passed it on to someone else.
They didn't have to cost them. They could have just sent the whole army there and killed everybody and taken it over. I mean, like,
that would have cost them a lot. It would have cost them a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. They didn't want to deal with this shit anymore. So they passed the buck to the UN.
You just painted that so ridiculously. It's like Britain was like, look, we want the people to decide, so we're gonna go ahead and put it to a vote.
No, I don't do that because my view of foreign policy is not that of a 7-year-old. Okay? No, cost was a part of it. The idea of running foreign colonies, the idea.
Were the Palestinians involved in the partition plan? Were they at the UN?
In 47, I don't even know if they have representatives there or not.
That alone should explain to you that this wasn't like it was Britain going, this is too expensive, it's not worth our fucking time, we have soldiers dying, it's costing us money, and this isn't going to be some easy thing.
Yes, this is part of why they didn't want to run colonies anymore, yes.
No, but this was
vastly they absolutely still did. They just chose which ones to keep.
Yeah, but even the ones they kept, a lot of it ended. Look at fucking Algeria and France. A lot of these turned into fucking disasters. I think after the collapse of the Ottoman Empire, they didn't want to.
Wait, hold on. But why in Algeria? Because Algerians started bombing the shit out of the innocent French people that were their cafes.
Britain spun one African colony off. Britain spun Ghana off.
Listen, if you guys want to say like Britain bad, if you want to have that, then you can say that. That's fine. I'm not interested in doing the soy fucking historical moral analysis of the countries. It sounds like we all agree. You just really want to say bad guy Britain or bad guy Western power. If you want to say that, that's fine. All I'm saying is that after World War I, and we all agree with this, I don't know what the fuck we're arguing, that they seem to have less of an interest in having like full control over colonies. They don't want to do that as much. That was the point of the mandatory system, was to say, hey, these people can fucking govern themselves, and they can figure this shit out. We don't want to try to fucking run everything.
But that's not what you said. You actually.
That is exactly what I said.
No. You said earlier, word for word, your chat, even if they disagree or not, you said the mandate was a temporary thing.
Yes, it was.
Hold on, and that they were going to leave and basically make them fully autonomous, which is not true at all.
That is true. That's exactly what they did. The goal was you make a mandate, and whatever stable government emerges from that area, they're the ones that inherit the land when you leave. What do you think happened in every other mandatory area? What are you talking about?
You can scream what you want, but it's not.
Where do you think the Hashemite kingdom came from in Jordan? Where the fuck do you think every other? Where did Syria, Iraq? What are you talking about? Yes, these were all mandatory areas. There were governments that emerged in the area. Your professor just said it earlier. Yeah, they drew borders. They were pretty arbitrary. But then there were kingdoms, there were democracies, there were republics, there were totalitarian dictatorships, whatever, that emerged from these areas. And then once the mandates expired, they were handed over to those people. Yes.
Yeah. Which is not what you just said. They were not. They were not given to the sole control of their own population. So little so that when Britain spun Iraq off in 1932, it continued to interfere in its politics and keep military bases on the ground. And in World War II, it seized control of the entire country because it didn't like its foreign policy. So no, was Iraq actually fully autonomous? No, it was never intended to be. The mandates weren't intended to be independent countries. If it was about creating countries,
you're arguing against things that I've never. I don't even know what you think. I forget it because you're using words in different ways. I'm sorry. When you say, because now you're going to tell me that, oh, well, autonomous means that you're a country that's never invaded, never traded with, never contacted with, has no military bases. I don't know what word I would use that you would use in whatever thing. But when I say autonomous, can I? Is this statement? Is this agreeable? That the mandatory system left those created states more autonomous than colonies would have been free then. Is that an agreeable statement or?
Yes,
okay.
But it's irrelevant.
It's not irrelevant. It's a difference in how.
You're arguing so generalities of just saying like, well, they had a little bit more autonomy, so like it's
not a little bit more autonomy, a significant amount of autonomy, a significant amount more than if they would have been just colonies or subjects of the fucking British.
Morocco literally had a government throughout the French protectorate. So did Tunisia. They're shown on the map as part of the French Empire. They literally have local governments. So are they autonomous? No.
We're that far in North Africa, in Northwest Africa, from Morocco and Tunisia. Were these guys part of the mandatory system?
I'm using your word autonomous. I'm questioning your use of autonomous here.
Autonomous as in they would have their own governments that would run their own internal affairs and their people would decide how to do it. I don't think, like Algeria, for instance, was still like a French colony. I don't think those people had rights or there were no people there that were like inheriting land autonomously. It was like ran by the French.
French Empire and internally autonomous.
Do what?
Morocco was part of the French Empire and internally autonomous. If you can accept that basic fact, then you can understand why we're criticizing your use of language here.
Okay, so do you think that Morocco, and I don't know what the level of French control was in Morocco, but are you telling me that Morocco existed in the same sense that Jordan and Iraq and Syria and Egypt existed? They have the same level of autonomy within those countries?
Morocco was a pre-existing country before France seized control of it.
I'm going to ask the same question again. I don't know why you're...
It had far more. It was far more of a country than those that are worse for. Much more so.
Okay, so Morocco was more of an independent country as part of the French Empire or whatever than what Jordan would become.
Than Iraq was post 32. Yes.
But
because Iraq was still part of the British Empire. Still folded into military alliances. They were still trying to maintain that connection all the way up until the Qasim coup that toppled the Hashemite monarchy. They were still interfering constantly in how the government was run because the goal was to have them as part of the empire, but without all the policing powers, without all the expense involved of direct control. Direct control was too expensive. They were trying to shift to cheaper forms of colonialism.
Okay, and you're telling me this happened until 32?
All across the 20th century.
You're telling me this happened until 32?
What happened until 32?
That Iraq wasn't its own, or because... When did the mandate in Iraq expire?
Independent in 1932, in the year that it had like a whopping 2,000 high school students. Yeah, it was independent, but had British troops, British bases, British control of foreign affairs, and that was the situation that stayed the case all the way until 1958, when a coup toppled it and pulled them out of the Baghdad Pact.
Okay. I'll take your word. I feel like because everything you've told me about the history between Israel and Palestine has been completely wrong. I'll take what you're saying for at face value. So really from 32 to 50 plus, you're saying that even though the mandate had expired, it was controlled by the British. That Iraq wasn't part of. It wasn't its own country at that point. That it was controlled by the British.
not possible to consider that either A, you're misunderstanding things that I'm saying, or B, don't know certain things? Because it's a really weird thing to say to someone with a doctorate in the subject that everything I've said is wrong.
It's really weird to me when I ask you for like a single point to an incredibly contentious topic that you know if you study this area, and you would act flabbergasted that I would ask you for evidence of the Jews wanting to pre-kick out or deny the partition plan when it's one of the most central defining points of the entire Israeli-Palestinian conflict. So yes, I am highly critical of everything you're saying. Yes.
Never accepted any of the partition plans as simply a fact. That they've lied about it consistently in propaganda is also a fact. Yes,
and you have asserted that with no evidence over and over again. I'm aware of that, yes.
And no, my evidence is an entire fucking bookcase on this subject.
Not how evidence works. A bookcase, the whole bookcase is not on a single thing.
And let's make it simple. If we give you the exact one, let's say he has time to go pull through it, and we give you the exact passages. What's your opinion after that?
I don't know. I would have to read it. My whole opinion on the thing won't completely change when I read one sentence. That's not how any of this works. I'm just curious if there's any evidence whatsoever in 47 that the Jews lied about accepting the partition plan. Never heard that before.
The historians are saying, or B, do the work that the historians are doing. Because the way you're approaching this is kind of like, I don't know, a flat earther talking about climate change.
I'm sorry, sir. The reason why historians engage in history is so that a layman doesn't have to. I'm not going to speak.
This is why it's there, and you are denying what they're saying and what I'm saying. Yes, the reason
I'm not denying what's being said. You haven't shown it to me.
The reason we write this shit is so that people can just read it and accept it and not have to do that.
And
work.
As a PhD,
or you can go and do the same work for yourself.
And as somebody who studied in the field, I imagine you'd be able to point me to that passage. Why would a PhD historian say, if you want to know this, go become a historian? That's your job.
Hold on, Liam. One second for a second. Hold on for a second. I asked you earlier, Destiny. This is where you're. Hold on, Liam. This is where you get really dishonest. I asked you earlier when you made a point. I said, "Can you pull up the passage?" And you said, "What?" I named 20 books, and I said, "No, give me the passage." And you said, "What? What? You just gonna buy the $20 book right now?" Trying to kind of distract from me saying, "Give me the fucking passage of what you're saying," but you never fucking brought it up because you know that the dishonest argument. You've got fucking 3 minutes.
Why do you think? Why do you think? Hold on, no, wait. Let's go. Let's revisit. Wait, no, wait. Let's revisit.
Let me finish my point. Let me finish my point. If he names the books as he did earlier, isn't that sufficient enough? Because you did that earlier, and now you're switching again.
I'm not him. I don't have the same standard. Why did I ask him to give me the book and the passage? Do you remember?
But he gave you the book.
No.
He gave you
Hold on. Answer the question. They can't do it. They can't answer a single question ever. My God. I'm actually going crazy. The question is why did I ask him for a book and a passage?
You didn't. You said exactly the opposite. You said,
"I
don't need a page and I don't need chapters."
Yeah, you said you don't need a page in a package. You said I could buy it on my Kindle and I'll Control F. And then he gave you multiple books, and then you started reading from a different book.
From the same author about the same time period. I'm going to ask you the same question again. This might be the end. Because I'm just going to keep asking this until I get an answer.
So you said you wanted to search it up so you have evidence so you can believe it. Which
also,
is fine.
I sent you material. I sent you the whole Peel Commission report. I sent you something, but you're not going to read it. You've never seen it in your life. My question, why did I ask him for a book or a passage? Do you know why I asked him?
Hold on, do you think he hasn't read the Peel Commission?
No, I said you haven't. I'm asking you, why did I ask him for a book or a passage?
Because a book or a passage or a book? Which one?
Either. I asked him for either or. Just point me to something.
He gave you fucking 3. He held
Why did I ask him? Do you understand English? Is it second language or I'll ask again? Why did I ask him for a book or a passage? First of all, let's start here. Do you understand what I've just asked you? Can you rephrase my question back to me? Why did I ask him for a book or a passage? What am I asking you?
You just want evidence.
And there was... Okay, I'll give you 30% on that answer. The reason why I asked him was because he said he was a PhD historian. And if he's going to drop that credential, part of doing a PhD is a whole fuck ton of research. Meaning I would hope that as a historian, he would know that you can't just... Let me finish my sentence. That's never what I asked for. What I would hope is that if you're a historian, you would know that there are seminal works on certain parts of conflicts, especially the most important parts of conflicts, and you would probably say, oh yeah, well this particular claim about what were Zionist ambitions around the partition plan, it's a hotly spoken about topic, and here are like 1 or 2 books that references somewhere in these books.
He did.
He pointed out 3 books.
You just said 1 or 2 seconds ago. So what? Is it 7? How many books for you? You're bullshitting and getting caught in front of your audience. You just said, just give me 1 or 2 books. And then I asked you, did you show? You said, but he only gave me 3. oh my God, you want 5? Is it 6 that makes it more correct
The
for you?
issue was that I don't think that
No,
what
no,
he
no,
was
step
saying
back.
for was
How
in
many-
any of those books. I want book. I want one. I want one. One book, one passage. That's all I
Gave
want.
you them.
Okay, which one was it? Sorry, tell me and I'll read it right now.
On what?
Not-
On what?
Specifically-
I want
Yeah.
evidence that the Jews were planning on accepting the partition plan, not extrapolation or conjecture from 1932, that Jews were going to accept the partition plan in 47 and then deport all the Muslims anyway.
And he just wants a book. Just any book.
Well,
I mean, not any
ideally
book,
so
but
that I
you know
can
what
look,
I mean.
yes, I can buy it on Kindle, I can look it up right now.
I agree.
Yes.
I agree. He gave you a
So-
book earlier.
So discussions of transfer.
What?
Because again, transfer shows up constantly in the
And
Zionist
he's doing it
literature.
again. And this is the part. Now I'm just going to tell my audience what you're doing. Now you make it broad and you go back 20 years. You will not talk about 47 because you're lying about it. That's what's happening right now. So you're going to keep appealing to, well, this is what Herzl said. This is what Ben-Gurion said in 1931. You're not going to give me an answer because you made a claim that you can't defend. You lied. You lied about the claim, which is fine. You didn't actually lie. It's conjecture from things that you heard from Zionist leaders pre-1940. And now you're expanding that into the future and you're assuming. That's what's happening. That's exactly what's happening.
I'm really struggling to understand how the fuck you graduated from high school with that argument.
Yeah,
It's super easy. I don't have a failure to understand at all right now how you're a historian PhD because apparently you guys don't engage in rhetoric or logic or anything at all. I guess you guys just write papers at each other. Are you even like? Is there? Wait.
Here's the thing, Destiny. You asked for a book. He gave you books, but that because he's
Which book?
He doesn't even know.
Give me one book.
He
Which
gave
book?
you 3. 1948.
Okay.
He had pulled up, and then you had pulled up a
1948.
different book, and you
Okay.
had pulled up a different book, and then read a passage that was giving the overview of what was happening, not about the minutes, not about the internal things. Here's another one. He brought it back up. Destiny. Here you go. Here's another one. The same one he brought up earlier. Does that look familiar? Did we bring it up, or is this
Hold on.
new?
Wait. Do you want that one or do you want 1948? Which book should I read? Which one will have the
multiple? That's what's great about it.
multiple?
Just
Multiple. Like I like how we don't give an answer. We pretend that saying multiple is an even better answer. Okay. What was that? What was the Ben-Gurion book? What was that called?
A state at any cost.
Okay.
But again, you have actually mentioned the names of some authors and books that also discuss this issue.
No, they've never said. I've
references
never
to
read
those
what you're
patterns.
claiming. I've
No,
never read what you're
Destiny,
claiming.
you admitted earlier you've only read one full book on the topic, and now you're just saying I've never read it. Oh wow, I'm fucking shocked. You admitted in front of everyone you've read one book on the topic, and then you just
cover
went,
to cover.
"You
I
haven't
said
read
when
it."
I say I've never read it, that means that I've never been pointed to that before. It's a polite way of saying I don't believe that exists. But I'm giving you the opportunity to point to me where it does.
How many books have you read on the topic fully? How many books have you read on the topic?
More than you.
Hold on. How many books have you read? I
More
have
than
2
you.
fucking masters. This is what I did
You
for
don't.
years.
There's no
I'm
shot.
asking
You have a master's in what? In thumb sucking? There's no shot. You have a master's in anything related to this area. I cannot believe that.
Don't red herring. How many books? You said it earlier. How many books have you read on the topic fully?
More than you. That's all I've got.
Stop bullshitting. Say the
No,
number.
it's not relevant. If you've got evidence for a
Say the
claim, then you
number.
50 books. 50 on it. 50.
telling a
50.
that they don't know a damn thing.
No,
You fucking got the line.
you understand. Hold on. You both understand.
You
You both.
earlier. I read
Yeah.
one book on the topic, but I've read tons
Cover to
of
cover.
passages.
Cover to cover.
Do you think that maybe you fucking missed some
Why is
shit?
that hard?
Well,
have
considering that I
hundreds I've
sat
read
next to
over
literally
the
the preeminent Israeli historian of all of the fucking Jewish history who studied this time period more than any author you've probably read combined, I think I'm going to go ahead with his opinion on it rather than the one that you guys you can't even source out of all these books you've apparently fucking read.
He literally gave it to you.
That's somebody? There's no preeminent historian that stands above all others.
Who spent more time digging through archives of the Nakba and pre-48 than Benny Morris? Has anybody spent more time in those archives? I'm pretty sure it's accepted that he spent more time going through original archives and Arabic oral history in that region than any other individual scholar. That's my understanding.
No.
Oh, okay.
No. It's not. And actually, there's a lot of people have been working the same material over the last 45 years. Because they started declassifying tons of material. There's a shitload of scholars who have been doing the same fucking work.
Who told you that, Destiny? He did?
That's just like I'm pretty sure it's a pretty well accepted fact. His books, even for people that disagree with him, they're citing to righteous victims. They're citing to 1948. Even other respected scholars. I think
No one's citing righteous victims for shit like this. That's written for a lay audience.
Sure.
That was written to be a New York Times bestseller.
Okay.
That's not a work of scholarship.
My bad.
Go back to his Birth
1948,
of the
okay.
Palestinian Refugee Crisis.
that's another one.
That's
Yeah,
his
sure,
main work on the subject.
Okay.
I mean, if you want, if the discussion of Nakba, Birth of the Palestinian Refugee Crisis is Benny Morris's work on that. And then
I
1948
understand.
is
That's great that you've
Harvard,
memorized the title. I wish you would have remembered some of what you'd read. That would have been so nice. But that's okay. I'll dig through this book right now and we'll see if I can find it. Okay.
For popular audience. 1948 is Harvard, 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 1948 is Harvard
Which one did you pull up, Liam? The book a minute ago.
I'm looking at
About what?
a state at any cost right now. That's what I'm looking for.
Oh, that one. Okay. That's again just sticking with the whole question of Ben Gurion and his statements. If you want to understand what he was actually talking about and what he was after, that's a good source.
Oh, and it's the birth of the refugee problem, not crisis, but.
This is his revised edition of it. This is the one that's actually on that topic.
What's it called?
The Birth of the Palestinian Refugee Problem Revisited. This is his revision. The original one's out of print, so this is the only one you're going to find now. Now, so I don't need to show you the original one. It's pointless. You can't get it. This one you can still find anywhere.